Hey everyone, welcome to today's marathon of amazing, astonishing, and awe-inspiring episodes of What If? Today, we're taking you back in time, deep into the past, to a land before time, before history. Prehistoric, you might say. Yeah, we're taking you through every prehistoric era we can think of. Billions of years ago, millions of years ago, before the dinosaurs, during the dinosaurs. We'll hit the Permian period, the Cambrian, the Cenozoic, drop you into some of the most dangerous eras that have ever existed here on Earth. See if you can make it out. Okay, first up, in true what if fashion, we put you in a situation where everybody dies. There are so many ways to die in the prehistoric eras, but I know what you like. You like it when you get killed by the mosasaurus, when you get killed by the Megalodon. You are a glutton for what-if punishment. Well, hypothetical situation daddy has got your back. Let's go back in time and face our demons. And our dinosaurs. This is the Megatherium, a giant sloth that roamed Earth just 12,000 years ago. This beast stood more than 3.5 meters tall. And today, we're gonna see what this creature was all about. Oof, that one hurt. But this is just one way you might die from a prehistoric animal. Creatures that lived thousands or millions of years ago were absolutely terrifying. From giant dinosaurs to the largest snakes ever discovered. If you were to come face to face with any of these creatures, there's a pretty good chance you'd end up dead. But how would that shake down? Okay, let's start by sending Digipeter 60 million years into the past. This is the Cretaceous period. During this period, part of the Mesozoic era, there's a good chance you could come face to face with a Titanoboa. Titanoboa was nearly twice as big as any snake living today. They grew to more than 12.5 meters long and typically weighed over 1,000 kilograms. These giant snakes would lurk in swampy rainforests in what's now known as Colombia.
Titanoboa is such a big animal that, like big animals, it probably spent most of its time in the water. It would have been in aquatic environments for a good part of it, simply because it's so big, it's going to be hard to hide.
That's Dr. Michael Caldwell, one of the leading paleontologists here in Canada. Our correspondent Rose spoke with him and other prehistoric experts to figure out how I would die from these creatures. Thanks, Rose.
No problem, Peter. And speaking of which, what would happen if the Titanoboa attacked you?
Now, a snake this big needs a lot of food. And seeing a piece of prey the size of Digipeter, it would attack instantly. But how? Well, these snakes would swim through the water, using it for camouflage to get close enough to attack. They often hung out near lakes and rivers, waiting to strike. As it approaches Digipeter, the Titanoboa would open its mouth, sinking its curved teeth into him in order to grip and secure his body. A Titanoboa would then coil its body around you rapidly. The feeling would be like you were being crushed by the Eiffel Tower. Oh, poor Digipeter. This feels wrong. So, is there a possibility that we don't have to use a Digipeter? We could use somebody else in a 3D model? No, not a possibility? Okay. As the Titanoboa wraps around your body, it would eventually stop your blood from flowing. And we all know what that leads to.
Honestly, if it was coming after you, you probably wouldn't stand much of a chance. If it's got to be you versus the snake, my vote's going for the snake.
Sorry, Peter, this doesn't sound like it'd be very good for you. How is it that the Titanoboa can open its jaws so wide that it could swallow you whole?
Particularly the boa and python kind have really developed extremely elastic muscles and soft tissues in the throat region.
Snakes' esophaguses blow up like a balloon and then deflate over time, so you can apply the same logic to the Titanoboa.
The body of the animal is so large that just weight alone, it pins you to the ground and it's going to get a hold of your head with its mouth, and you're going to be crushed just under the weight of the animal. Whether it could or could not constrict you really wouldn't matter.
Great, thanks for making this even worse for me. Now, as you're passing through the Titanoboa's body, you're slowly being dissolved by the snake's stomach acids. This would be a long, slow, and painful process. Remember, it's a 12.5-meter snake. Well, it wouldn't really be painful since you're already dead. And by the time the Titanoboa has finished digesting you, virtually nothing would be left. That's right, the Titanoboa's stomach acids are so strong that even your bones would be dissolved. The only parts of you remaining would be your nails and some of your hair.
So even though the Titanoboa's belly might be full, it might not be for the best.
If you choose to eat a big goat, you're sitting there for 3 or 4 days before you can move. That has serious biological repercussions because anything walking by and you're just like a snack with another snack inside of you.
So Peter, even though now you're eaten by a Titanoboa, you can at least be happy that the predator has now become the prey.
Yeah, I guess so. Okay, let's rank these deaths on our pain scale. I'm giving this one a 7 out of 10 because we have some even more terrible scenarios coming up. Okay, now that's how you die 60 million years ago. Now let's go back a little further, 66 million years into the past. This is the age of dinosaurs. Lurking around every corner is something that wants to kill you. Let's see how Digipeter fares. Why is the ground shaking? Oh no, oh gosh, it's a Tyrannosaurus Rex. I better start moving. Run, little guy, run! This nearly 7,000 kilogram beast was the ruler of the dinosaur kingdom. Hunting in complete solitude, it's approaching Digipeter at nearly 60 kilometers per hour. Yeah, I don't think I stand a chance here. Maybe I can survive by hiding behind a tree or staying very still. After all, the T-Rex was only good at detecting prey when it's moving. It had eyes the size of oranges, which are bigger than any mammal we have living today. There's no chance my digital legs are getting away from this. All of a sudden, the T-Rex bites with its banana-sized teeth. It had a bite force of nearly 13,000 psi. That would feel like you were being crushed by a building. Then it would tear the flesh off your bones until they were stripped clean. That doesn't look too fun. But what do we really know about the T-Rex? I mean, other than what we've watched in the movies. What do the experts have to say?
I went to the Canadian Museum of Nature to talk with Dr. Jordan Mellon to find out. I saw online that Tyrannosaurs are really fast runners. They can run up to 45 kilometers an hour. Is that true?
I think the consensus nowadays is T-Rex probably wasn't as fast as you suggested, probably more like half that. It would have needed more muscle dedicated to its legs than it possibly could have fit on those legs. Because of course, the bigger you are and the faster you want to move, the more muscle you need. And at some point, the amount of muscle required to move a certain speed is just impossible.
Not only that, but if the T-Rex were to move at speeds over 40 kilometers an hour, that would increase its chances of falling over, which, according to Dr. Mellon,
if you've got an animal moving that fast and it falls at those speeds, forget about it. Like, that's a dead animal.
Okay, maybe its speed is over-exaggerated in movies, but you know what isn't? Their size. The T-Rex is ridiculously massive. It wasn't until I got to see a cast of its skull where it really started to click.
You know, T-Rex could eat you in one bite effectively. You know, the skull's 4 or 5 feet long.
And its teeth were even more terrifying.
What's really cool about T-Rex is that its teeth are unlike those of many other meat-eating dinosaurs. They're almost like banana-shaped. And this would have allowed T-Rex to not just cut through meat, but crush bone.
This kind of feels like a dagger / really, really heavy knife with tiny serrations on both sides. I feel like this could kill somebody, honestly. It gets even worse. There's some evidence that suggests T-Rexes might have traveled and hunted in packs. So Peter, it looks like there's some good and bad. On one hand, the T-Rex is ridiculously massive, deadly, and you might have to deal with a couple at a time. But on the other, it's not as fast as we thought, so you might have a chance to outrun it. Good luck.
Okay, let's try this again. So, if you were transported 66 million years into the past and a T-Rex was coming for you, it might look something like this. Instead of just one T-Rex, Digipeter is dealing with 3, 4. He can try standing still in hopes that the T-Rexes don't see him, but wait, that doesn't look like it's gonna work. T-Rexes actually had amazing eyesight, and they didn't rely on movement to see their prey. They had better eyes than a modern-day hawk, so seeing prey was incredibly easy.
One of the really distinctive features about T-Rex in particular is that its eyes face forward like yours and mine. It had binocular vision. It had an overlapping field of view. So the eyes would have been located one here and in the same socket on the other side here. That's a big eye. It would have taken in a lot of light, so they almost certainly had good vision.
So Digipeter has no choice but to run away and hope for the best. And this time, running might be his best option. Oh no, never mind. Remember, T-Rexes were also ambush predators, so you likely wouldn't even have the chance to run away from them.
Jurassic Park, the T-Rex in that movie was always roaring and announcing its presence. You knew it was getting close before it was there because it was causing the ground to shake. And very likely T-Rex was not quite so loud.
Instead, they'd sneak up on you, chomp down, and kill you. Then the whole group of T-Rexes would devour your body, bones and all.
So if the T-Rex ate everything and it was a bone crusher, did it actually eat the bones of the animals that it ate?
Yes, and I've got something to show you here. This is actually a T-Rex turd. There was some science done on this. It was put inside of a CT scanner, and it contains many fragments of dinosaur bone.
Ooh, this one is nasty. This is an 8 on the pain scale. But the T-Rex wasn't the only deadly creature that would be out to get you. Another deadly dino and Jurassic Park star during this time? The Raptor. If they're anything like what we see in the movies, these guys are terrifying and extremely dangerous. Early research depicted these creatures standing at about 2 meters tall. That's 6 feet. They would easily use their size and strength to overpower Digipeter. The main thing you'd need to watch out for? Their sharp, sickle-shaped claws. These claws could inflict fatal wounds or disembowel you almost instantly. And good luck outrunning them. A raptor could run at speeds of over 40 kilometers per hour.
This sounds pretty bad for you, but I wonder if we can get a second opinion.
So the velociraptors in Jurassic Park were nowhere as big as they were depicted. Velociraptors in life were more turkey-sized. They're quite a bit smaller.
Good news, but you still gotta worry about those claws.
Historically, the thinking was that killer claw there, the idea was that really it slashed open the belly of its prey.
But current research suggests that these so-called killer claws may have been quite different.
The problem is that when you actually look at the cross-section of the claw, it's not especially sharp or pointed. It's quite rounded. And so now the thinking is that maybe that claw was used to, like as a crampon, maybe to climb up on top of its prey, or maybe it was used to hold down the prey while the jaws did the dirty work.
In order to get our answer, I wanted to know just one simple thing. If a human was to hunt a raptor, who would win?
One-on-one?
Yep.
I think humans are pretty smart. I'll go advantage human.
Okay, but what does that mean for Digipeter? How many could he take on?
So I'll give you 5. 5, yeah.
How many raptors do you think I could take on?
11.
Yeah, that sounds about right. That sounds about right.
All right, I like my odds. So, based off what we now know about raptors, maybe an attack would look more like this. Let's start by making the raptor way smaller and adding some feathers, another thing Dr. Mallon told us. Now it kind of looks more like a modern-day bird. And just like we're not afraid of most birds, you probably don't need to be incredibly scared of raptors. Sure, they might attack and hurt you. Again, they have the claws and the sharp teeth, but in terms of them killing our Digipeter, they don't really stand a chance. The only other thing Digipeter would have to worry about is if these raptors traveled in packs.
A lot of people think that raptors moved about in packs, that they were pack hunters. Again, that's thanks to the movies. But we actually don't have great evidence for pack hunting in any of these animals.
Phew, okay. Then I'm gonna chalk this up as a win for me, or for Digipeter. It looks like there's a good chance he'd survive an encounter with a raptor. So this is more like a 5 out of 10 on the pain meter. Okay, let's get back to our giant sloth. Would dying at the slow hands of this creature really be that bad? Well, again, our correspondent Rose may have the answer.
You might think of a giant sloth as, well, sloth-like, moving slowly and methodically. I'm talking 1/4 of a kilometer an hour, but they're actually a lot faster than that. I talked to Marisa Gilbert to find out more.
They probably moved around 3 to 5 kilometers an hour, and they probably were able to do short bursts of 8 kilometers an hour, but they were not very fast animals.
But we wouldn't have to worry about it killing us, right? These giant sloths were strictly herbivores.
We can say that yes, they were eating plant material. We know they were eating stems, foliage, leaves, that sort of thing, fruits.
But this time, instead of this giant sloth attacking us humans, it may have been the other way around. Megatherium may have gone extinct due to humans and climate change.
Sites have found tool marks on Megatherium and other ground sloth bones. And so it's safe to say that yes, it was a great resource for our ancestors. They were hunting and utilizing ground sloths for sure.
Finally, now it's time for some revenge. Instead of Digipeter constantly getting his butt kicked by prehistoric creatures, he's gonna fight back and win. The Megatherium was a type of giant sloth that originated in South America. Around 35 million years ago, when humans hunted these beasts, we did so with a variety of different tactics. Instead of using brute force and chasing these animals down, we used a more stealthy approach. And that's what Digipeter is going to do. Let's equip him with a stone spear and see what happens. As he approaches the local watering hole, he sees a giant sloth, ready for the taking. This could mean food for him and his tribe for the next 3 months. But remember, it's a giant sloth. These creatures were massive. They needed multiple humans to take them down. So, let's duplicate Digipeter and give him a fighting chance. Ah, that's better. Okay, now this should be a walk in the park. Our Digipeters go and ambush the Megatherium, poking and prodding with their spears, but as they continue their fight, it's not looking good. What happened here? Well, even though we had all the advantages we could think of, hunting a giant sloth was still no easy task back in the day. Even though they were mainly herbivores, they were pacifists. They'd still fight back when pushed into a corner. Their claws were more than 30 centimeters long. That's 1 foot. They mainly used them for digging roots, but now they're being used for clawing humans. If you got swiped with one of these, you'd be left to bleed out. A slow, painful death. You might be able to recover, but without modern medicine, the chances are pretty slim. This is an 8 out of 10 for me. Okay, next, we're going over 300 million years into the past to experience the Carboniferous period. This era had one particularly terrifying trait: giant insects. Now, this was because of really high oxygen levels in the atmosphere at the time. The insects drank it up. The extra oxygen allowed them to grow bigger than we've ever seen. One of the most notable bugs, the Arthropleura. This giant centipede-like creature was over 2 meters long. Once it sees you, it'll rush on over and start biting you with its giant fangs. An insect this large is surely going to want to attack you. Maybe it wants your blood. Or at least that's what you think would happen with an insect so large. Actually, research suggests that the Arthropleura was a super slow-moving insect. It hung out in forests and dined on dead plant material all day. It wouldn't be interested in you or any other creature. I'm giving this one a 0 on the pain scale. Okay, so we might not have to worry about a giant insect coming after us, but one creature we will have to worry about? The saber-toothed tiger. Let's fast forward from the Carboniferous to just 56 million years ago, a time when these beasts were one of the apex predators. These giant cats weighed over 200 kilograms and could run up to 40 kilometers per hour, but only for short bursts. And due to this lack of running, saber-toothed tigers were ambush predators. They'd hide in the bushes and the tall grass, waiting to strike. And when they did, they'd pounce on you with their giant claws and teeth. Their canine teeth could be up to 20 centimeters long. But once they got hold of you, there'd be no going back. The saber-tooth would be on top of you, clawing and biting. It would likely go for your neck first to incapacitate you, kill you. Then it would feast on the rest of you. But unlike most predators during these times, this ferocious tiger wouldn't consume everything. It'd feast on your muscles and your flesh, but leave your bones. This is because it didn't want to damage its valuable canine teeth. Remember, we're about 56 million years away from veterinary dentists. Without the canine teeth that this beast was named for, it wouldn't be all that scary.
And you probably wouldn't have to worry about these saber-toothed tigers attacking you in the first place.
So we don't have any evidence of any tool marks on Smilodon, and we don't have any evidence of Smilodon attacking or having used humans as prey. We do know that they overlapped in time and space for quite some time. And I could say with certainty that there were encounters. They did see each other. They lived in the same place. They utilized the same prey. Were they prey? Were they preyed upon? I can't answer that.
So luckily for you, Peter, even if you were in this time period and saw this big cat, you probably wouldn't end up in a fight with one. But let's say you somehow did and wanted to survive. What are you doing next?
Humans would craft spears and strategize on how they'd attack a saber-toothed tiger. They'd also make sure that they set up camps in places that would give them a lot of advance notice if a saber-tooth was about to attack. These first encounters with saber-toothed tigers would be terrifying. Similar to the sloth, a single attack from this beast would mean the end for you. Yeah, I'm giving this one a 9 on the pain meter. But the good news is, it wouldn't always be like this.
After all, these saber-toothed tigers went extinct 10,000 years ago. And it wasn't from humans. There is no evidence that shows we had any significant encounters.
There was climate change happening at the time, and so they were part of that larger megafauna that went extinct at the end of the last ice age.
Okay, next up, the terror croc. About 80 million years ago, this beast reigned supreme. It was over 10 meters long and had a stronger bite force than the T-Rex. Similar to a lot of other animals on our list, terror crocs would ambush you. You'd likely be unaware of their presence due to their ability to camouflage themselves near the water. If you got too close, a terror croc would quickly lunge at you with its powerful open jaws and then bite down. And if its bite didn't kill you, it would perform the death roll. This is when a terror croc drags you underwater and spins you rapidly. This kind of punishment would almost certainly kill you. At that point, the terror croc would use its massive teeth to chew you into chunks, splitting your body into multiple pieces. And then the terror croc would consume every last chunk of you. Now, similar to modern-day crocodiles, the terror croc had a highly acidic stomach acid that was capable of dissolving your bones. Ugh, I think I'll pass. Now, given that these creatures basically roam around today, I'm giving this a 10. More on the fear scale, but also on the pain meter. Regardless of whatever creature we think we might be able to take on in a fight, I think coming across any of these scenarios would be terrifying. Let's just say I'm pretty happy that humans are at the top of the food chain in our modern world. There's a giant, vicious lizard monster lurking in the ocean. It's more massive than any creature that exists today. Say hello to the modern-day mosasaurus. This creature went extinct 66 million years ago, but what if it evolved to live today? In this episode, we're going to look at the special traits the mosasaurus would need in order to avoid extinction, and what kind of terrifying beast it would evolve into if it lived in the modern day. A world with modern-day mosasaurus would change everything. Instead of just shark attacks, stories of random mosasaurus attacks would be in the news. This ambush predator might attack unsuspecting swimmers who venture a little too far away from shore. And it wouldn't just be the loss of a limb. No, the mosasaurus is a deadly, opportunistic hunter that eats any prey that comes its way. It would hunt you down incredibly fast. Using a quick burst of energy, it would accelerate from 0 to 48 kilometers per hour in just a second. Similar to a crocodile, which can suddenly lurch into action. If you were less than 30 meters away from this beast, it would be on you before you could even blink. Propelling it is a super powerful tail fin, just like a shark's. But this tail fin could put the mosasaurus in jeopardy. In today's world, just like shark fin soup, mosasaurus tail fin soup would be a specialty dish, sought after by humans who believe in traditional medicine. It wouldn't have any particular properties to make humans superhuman-like, but the myth would persist. Now, given the might of the mosasaurus, acquiring its tail fin would be a much more difficult feat. Humans could only get one if mosasaurus washed up dead on shore. Hunting this creature would not be a viable option. If you were ambushed by the mosasaurus, you'd find yourself caught in its massive double-hinged jaw. Rows of sharp teeth line every part of its mouth. These teeth aren't for chewing food. No, they're used for clamping down and holding prey in place. On that very first bite, the mosasaurus can go right through their prey and kill it. After that, all that's left is for our modern-day mosasaurus to swallow its victim whole. The double hinging of jaws means that they both work independently. Each time the jaw ratchets back, the prey gets pushed in several feet. A 6-foot-long sunbather? Well, they'd be swallowed in just a couple of bites. Think you've got a chance of slipping out once you're caught by these jaws? Yeah, that's unfortunately not the case. To prevent wriggling prey from escaping, the mosasaurus has a third row of teeth that line the upper jaw. This is just a taste of the mosasaurus's incredible power. But believe it or not, this deadly creature had humble beginnings millions of years ago. 98 million years ago. The mosasaurus's journey starts with the Aegialosaurs. This was a family of monitor lizards who made their way from land and back to water. These lizards were the mosasaurus's ancestors. They were much smaller, no more than 1.5 meters long. Over the next few million years during the Cretaceous period, these little guys underwent a rapid evolution, an evolution that spawned about 40 different species of mosasaur. And one in particular emerged much bigger and badder. The Mosasaurus hoffmanni, commonly referred to as the mosasaurus, was the biggest and most ferocious of these species. This creature was 9 to 15 meters in length. That's even longer than the T-Rex. It lived in oceans everywhere around Earth. It would slither around with its long, streamlined body, and its legs were extremely powerful. They transformed into whale-like flippers that would help with swimming and provide stability. As the mosasaurus evolved and became bigger, older apex predators called ichthyosaurs went extinct. allowing the mosasaurus to become even more dominant. Over the 25 million years that the mosasaurus lived on Earth, they evolved into truly terrifying creatures. They ate sharks, dolphins, sea turtles, and any other creature they could sink their teeth into. They'd even eat their own species. Yeah, the mosasaurus was a ruthless cannibal when the opportunity was presented. In fact, one mosasaur fossil was discovered with 3 mosasaur skulls inside of it. Today, we puny humans would just be a light snack for the mosasaurus. To satisfy its voracious appetite, it would go after today's biggest marine animals. Whales would be a favorite, and of course it would have no problem devouring one of its own kind. To do this, it would smash its opponent with its snout. This was a trait of one species of mosasaur, the Tyrannosaurus. Tylosauruses had bony growths protecting their front teeth and forming a key part of their reinforced snout. This bony snout would be a valuable trait that our modern-day mosasaurus would likely have incorporated over multiple waves of evolution. Now, once it dealt a blow with its snout, the mosasaurus would begin to devour any massive creature. But how did the mosasaurus find its prey in the first place? It would smell them out. The mosasaurus was equipped with a third nifty feature, a forked tongue that it used to smell its prey underwater. This is called chemoreception. The tongue flicks out, gathers odor molecules, and then delivers them to an organ in the mouth that detects prey. This same smelling organ was used to smell out a potential mate. Good luck to that potential mate if it has the wrong smell. It might become dinner instead. If the mosasaurus were alive today, humans would be in some pretty big trouble. Imagine swimming in the ocean and you had a cut seeping a tiny bit of blood into the water. Well, the mosasaurus would smell it and snatch you up in an instant. Deep sea diving might just stop being a thing. How could you predict when the mosasaurus would come and get you from the depths of the ocean? Now, the mosasaurus that lived and died 66 million years ago didn't venture into deep ocean waters, but a mosasaurus that evolves to survive extinction? Well, that one would. To understand why, we have to go back to the catastrophe that wiped out both the dinosaurs and the mosasaurs and see how the mosasaurus could have evolved with different traits in order to survive. Traits that would make it particularly deadly in our modern world, 66 million years ago. All right, let's go back to a time where something completely unexpected happened, something that would change the course of history. An asteroid came hurtling out of the sky and crashed into the Yucatan Peninsula. An enormous crater was carved into Earth and tsunamis rose into the air. With the heat of the crash, rocks melted, throwing tiny molten particles into the air. This came back down to Earth in the form of hot, deadly shards. Any mosasaurus poking its head out of the shallow water would have been shredded instantly. A cloud of ash enveloping Earth caused a decade-long impact winter, killing off the majority of plants and animals. Sulfuric acid rained down on the oceans, and 90% of phytoplankton went extinct. In the oceans, the marine ecosystem collapsed. 75% of marine animals died out. This was a major problem for Mosasaurus, as their food source was disappearing. But there still was some food out there, mostly in the form of new types of algae popping up. These became a food source for krill and shrimp. So could the Mosasaurus use these as a food source? Well, unfortunately, no. Large predators need large prey, not krill. So the mighty Mosasaurus, which had ruled the oceans for the past 25 million years, went extinct. Could there have been another way for the Mosasaurus to survive? Well, let's look at what features the sea animals who did survive had. Sharks are particularly interesting because they've lived through many different extinctions. One of the reasons sharks were able to survive this extinction is that they don't just hunt in shallow water. Sharks have the ability to navigate to different parts of the water to find food. from warm waters to the depths of the ocean. Now, being partially warm-blooded helps sharks maintain a higher internal body temperature, allowing them to survive in really cold waters. They also have the ability to move through varying depths of water, increasing their options for food. The mosasaurus was limited to hunting mostly shallow waters. It was a pretty good swimmer, but it didn't wander too far from the shoreline. Its strength was to make quick bursts of power to make a kill, rather than taking long swims. A mosasaurus that evolved into a more tapered body and with paddles that were more fin-like would have fared better. This mosasaurus would have been better able to migrate to different parts of the ocean, covering the waters at a steady pace. Scientists have evidence that the mosasaurus was already warm-blooded. This will come in handy as its new swimming prowess takes it to different parts of the ocean. Because it's warm-blooded, it can maintain its internal body temperature even in cold water. Finally, this mosasaurus will need a swim bladder, an adaptation that will borrow from deep-sea sharks. This bladder is a gas-filled sac that it can inflate or deflate whenever it likes, allowing it to roam different depths of the ocean. Okay, are we done? Oh, no, we might need one more modification. We need to move the sinuses of the mosasaurus to be external, like what whales and dolphins have. This is what enables them to dive deep. With external sinuses, there's less of a chance that the mosasaurus will suffer skull damage from too much compression at the lower depths. Alright, this iteration of the mosasaurus would have easily survived this mass extinction event. It would have swum deep out into the ocean to hunt prey like sharks. These survival mechanisms would make the mosasaurus a terror in all parts of the oceans today, and at the same time, a nearly invincible survivor. Our modern-day mosasaurus would be an incredibly vicious predator. But there's a second, more gentle version that could have evolved as well. To see how a second version of the mosasaurus might have evolved, we have to go back again, this time to the Paleogene epoch, spanning 66 million to 23 million years ago. The extinction event 66 million years ago would have kicked off the first tiny change. Mosasauruses were struggling to find sufficiently large prey. Some might have been less skilled at hunting sharks, some of the largest prey available. Well, these mosasauruses may have started to suck up smaller fish, swallowing them whole. As they evolved with this diet, there would have been less use for the 3 rows of sharp teeth that they used to catch and kill larger marine animals. Maybe a subset of these mosasaurus began to evolve into filter feeders. The first transition, well, possibly a gradual change in skull shape to be more adapted to sucking in rather than chomping on prey. This type of evolutionary change has been seen in whales. Ancient whales had teeth, but a subset of them underwent evolutionary changes, lost their teeth, and became filter feeders. Okay, let's fast forward to 56 million years ago. Temperatures rose in what's called the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum. Massive volcanic eruptions shot tons of carbon dioxide up into the air, causing temperatures to increase by about 8 degrees Celsius. That's 14 degrees Fahrenheit. The North and South poles felt like the tropics. Now, what would happen with our 2 different mosasaurus species during this time? Well, first, let's look at the ferocious mosasaur. 2 different scenarios could play out. One possibility is that the mosasaurus, a giant reptile that thrived in warm temperatures, would have gotten a massive boost in size. Other reptiles like crocodiles and turtles would have thrived as well. This mosasaurus would have fed on whatever prey was available. Sharks, crocs, turtles. They would have gotten larger and larger, reaching 25 to 30 meters in length. Now, in a second scenario, our mosasaurus might have found the temperature spike challenging. Ocean waters absorbing more carbon dioxide might have become increasingly acidic. We know a lot of marine life died off during this period. Well, lucky for our mosasaurus, it was already adapted to roam in different parts of the ocean. It would have been able to swim in open waters looking for large prey, or it could swim into warmer areas to eat alligators. Okay, let's have a look at our second mosasaurus, the gentle giant that's also evolving at this time. Its food sources would have been changing. During the temperature spike, algae blooms appeared on the coastal waters, food for marine microorganisms like krill. The gentle giant's signature sharp teeth would have first become narrow and spiky, acting like a type of mesh, and then, over time, they would have transformed into a sieve-like structure, enabling the mosasaurus to feed on tiny sea creatures like plankton and krill, filtering them out from the seawater. Now, after this heating event 56 million years ago, temperatures began to cool down, but then rose to their previous levels during the Eocene optimum. But both our mosasauruses with newly evolved traits would be experts in getting through this hot period. This would be a repeat of what each species had done before. The vicious mosasaurus would swim the oceans, and the gentle giant would feed on the krill. 34 million years ago. Temperatures on Earth gradually declined until about 34 million years ago. Both species of mosasaurus would have thrived using their different survival strategies. One would have become a more ruthless killing machine, and the other would have mirrored the evolution of whales, getting large, eating plankton and krill. In today's world, the victims of the ruthless mosasaurus wouldn't just be the casual swimmers and deep-sea divers. Smaller fishing boats would get attacked by groups of mosasaurus. More about why that would be the case in a second. Because of that behavior, the safest commercial operations in the 21st century would be large fishing boats, the ones built like tanks. But even these bruisers would stay clear of the hunting grounds of these gigantic sea monsters. So, what would have made the vicious mosasaurus evolve as pack hunters? This behavior would have been created by a real evolutionary need. The fossil records of mosasauruses from 66 million years ago don't reveal them to be social creatures. They would regularly engage in big snout fights, battling for dominance. But this nasty behavior may have led to their cooperation over time. Now, to understand why, let's go to the Neogene period, 23 to 2.6 million years ago. During this time, the Megalodon evolved, the biggest shark ever, scarfing down 1,200 kilograms of food a day. The Meg would have been a key rival of our mosasaurus. Both the Meg and the mosasaurus would have been competing for baleen whales, the big marine mammals of that time. Maybe in order to compete with the Meg, the mosasaurus would have opted to be a little more friendly. Maybe instead of fighting with their own species, they would start to team up for the hunt. 2.6 million years ago. This need for cooperative behavior would have become solidified even more during the first part of the Quaternary period, 2.6 million years ago. Around 20 periods of glaciation came and went, greatly stressing the environment and its inhabitants. Now, during this time, the baleen whale, the bread and butter of the apex predator diet, was fighting to survive itself. Competition for food would have intensified even more. Now, both the Meg and the mosasaurus were fundamentally solitary creatures in adulthood. Large, powerful predators usually are. But it's possible that the mosasauruses that had begun cooperating with each other would have survived better, so this trait would have been favored in new generations. Maybe it would have just been a small pod with 2 to 3 members, but enough to cover the center, front, and rear during the kill. In this formation, the mosasaurus can take on any mighty Megs, as well as any great white sharks. Hunting in a coordinated way and being part of a social group all require a high degree of intelligence. Mosasauruses would have grown a bigger brain during this period. And the result of this behavioral change? The mosasaurus would have outcompeted the Megalodon for food. The Meg would have gone extinct 2.6 million years ago, maybe earlier, as it would have been fighting both the great white sharks and the newly evolved mosasaurus for food. The mosasaurus would have continued to reign supreme, fighting with the sharks to eat the whales. Plus, mosasaurus pods would have targeted enormous whale sharks and blue whales, especially if they found one swimming by itself. And remember, these mosasaurus are still cannibals, so They might even go after the gentle giant mosasaurus that evolved. So, how would the gentle giant mosasaurus have fared during the ice ages? Well, they would have become even bigger. The gentle giants would have grown exceptionally big during this time, swimming thousands of kilometers to feast on the massive amounts of krill and other nutrients. Today, after the last ice age, around 11,000 years ago, the modern-day mosasaurus would grow massive. The oceans would be teeming with large prey for food: whales, sharks, dolphins. Its body is adapted to roam far and wide to kill prey, so it becomes larger and larger, a huge predator of the 21st century. Okay, this is the mosasaurus you saw at the start of this episode. 40 meters long, 200 tons, the menace of the sea. In contrast, the gentle giant mosasaurus would be found mostly in the coldest waters of the Antarctic, far, far away from its evil twin. Governments would debate whether to use systematic methods to kill off these modern-day moas, but ethicists would weigh in against it, saying that it's our duty to coexist with other species. A consensus would emerge, allowing the mosasaurus its hunting grounds, separate from us humans. And the two giant mosasaurus species would be essential to keeping our modern ocean environment in balance. The vicious mosasaurus would weed out the weak and sick large marine animals, keeping ocean populations healthy. Similar to sharks, the mosasaurus would hunt large predators like the grouper, which in turn hunts herbivorous fish. With these populations maintained at the right levels, algae growth is kept in check and coral reefs flourish. And for our safety, as our technology improves, humans would find ways of using sonar to spot these beasts ahead of time, map out where they fish, and plot out other areas for us to hang out. Meanwhile, the fashion industry's never-ending need for lizard skin bags and clothes would result in the targeting of the gentle giant mosasaurus. They would be hunted to near extinction. Now, as their population dwindled, whales would grow larger and take over their ecological niche. And the day of reckoning is coming, because at its size, the vicious mosasaurus would be consuming so many large marine animals. And the bigger it gets, the more it hunts. 20 million years ago, the Megalodon was king of the oceans. The largest shark that ever lived, it ate other megasharks for breakfast. But as an ice age engulfed the world, this enormous sea giant's time came to an end. What if, through a miraculous twist of fate, the Megalodon had managed to survive? Just how large and scary would the Megalodon be today? And what would happen to humans who went into the ocean? This is What If, and here's what would happen if the Megalodon never stopped evolving. A megalodon living in the 21st century, one that never stopped evolving, would be a truly frightening and majestic creature. Today's Meg would likely have expanded to the size of a blue whale, about 30 meters long and a hefty 200 tons in weight. That's as heavy as 33 elephants, with a beating heart as big as a car. Today's megalodon would need to eat 3,600 kilograms of food a day and would be the largest animal that's ever existed. It would also be equipped with some new survival traits, ones that have helped it last these 3 million years. What do you think those traits would be? Well, before we get into the making of Meg 2.0, let's look at what the Megalodon was like in its heyday. Let's go back 23 million years ago, during the Miocene and Pliocene epochs. The Megalodon was roaming about, conquering the oceans. It spanned about 18 meters long. That's 3 times longer than the biggest great white shark we've ever encountered. Since it was so massive, well, obviously it weighed a lot, as much as a space shuttle, about 30 to 65 metric tons. In fact, the word megalodon, when translated from its origin in ancient Greek, means big tooth. Serrated on one side, these teeth were perfect for sinking into large, meaty fish and tearing them apart. Throughout its life, the meg, like other sharks, would shed and grow new teeth, possibly growing up to 40,000 teeth over its lifetime. These teeth chewed through a lot of food, about 1,100 kilograms, that's 2,500 pounds every single day. That's the equivalent of 2 cows. 10,000 quarter pounders every single day. But those were off the menu in this era. And the meg was also a cannibal if it got a chance. It would happily feast on another meg if it could. This giant shark was also a ruthless killer. It had a pretty straightforward but effective strategy to finish off its victims. It would slide into the water beneath its prey so it couldn't be seen. Then it would shoot up vertically to slam into the animal at high speed. Imagine being pummeled with 65 tons of pure meg. The prey, usually large whales, didn't stand a chance against this high-pressure assault. After that kind of injury, the fight was over. Then the meg could settle into a nice meal. As a victim of the meg, you could also get swallowed up whole. Yeah, with a skull 4.5 meters long, it could comfortably take in something as large as a whole family car. So watch out for this terrifying creature when it comes into the modern day. And of course, the meg had mega babies. Baby megs were 3 to 4 meters long, so good luck coming out alive if you run into one of those. The Megalodon really came into its own during the Miocene epoch, from 23 to 5 million years ago. At the start of the period, the Earth was warm, but then later it began to cool. During this time, the meg preferred hanging out in warm, tropical waters. In fact, it roamed multiple places across the globe. Meg teeth as old as 3 million years have been found in waters everywhere, except Antarctica. So, with a creature this deadly and powerful conquering the seas, how did it manage to go extinct? Well, maybe it was climate change. During the Miocene period, a cooling trend had begun. This carried all the way into the Pliocene and gave way to a big freeze. During the era after that, 2.6 million years ago, an ice age began. According to one theory, these freezing temperatures from the ice age may not have been suitable for the meg. They could have led to its extinction. But other scientists disagree. Studying the meg found that temperature fluctuations seen in earlier periods didn't impact the shark. It managed to survive. The meg was able to survive changes in temperature because it was partially warm-blooded. It had an adaptation so it could warm its blood using heat from its muscles as it moved. This allowed it to maintain a body temperature 7 degrees Celsius higher than the surrounding water. So while it preferred warmer weather, it could survive in cooler temperatures as well. So what was different about the Pleistocene Ice Age? Well, for one, this ice age was a lot colder than before. The meg and other creatures that had evolved in the last tens of millions of years had never experienced such a deep freeze. The Pleistocene Ice Age, 2.6 million years ago, was the most severe temperature drop that Earth had faced in the last 500 million years. As the ice crept over the Earth, there was a severe decrease in habitat for both land and sea creatures. Sea levels dropped 200 meters and coastal land areas dried up. As water turned to ice and sea levels dropped, the baleen whale, the meg's main prey, was fighting to survive. And it wasn't just the cold. Changes in ocean currents reduced the flow of nutrients in parts of the ocean, areas that were prime feeding grounds for the baleen whale. This affected its population. And there was another problem. Baleen whales give birth in warmer waters, but then migrate to colder waters to feed. With the rapid reduction in warmer waters, there breeding grounds would have also been disrupted, another pressure leading to extinction. With baleen whales going extinct, the Meg had to focus on smaller prey like dolphins and seals. But this would have been a problem because the Meg was facing competition for prey from a smaller and more agile competitor, the great white shark. 1/3 the size of the Meg, the great white shark was nimbler, needed less to eat, and was competing for the Meg's food. Both baleen whales and the quicker dolphins and seals. And in the battle for fast-moving smaller prey, great whites were the winners. The Meg's breeding grounds would also have been disrupted. Its babies lived in nurseries and shallow waters. As sea levels oscillate up and down, these shallow waters would have risen and then receded unpredictably. They would no longer have provided a safe spot for baby Megs to survive. And at the same time, the Meg's massive feeding requirements for energy and to maintain its high internal body temperature were not getting any smaller. So that's what led to the Meg's extinction. It feels a little wild that this apex predator essentially starved to death. But could we rewrite history? Could the Megalodon somehow survive into the modern day? Well, let's take a look at a scenario where the Meg was able to evolve to get bigger and more powerful than ever before. In order for the Megalodon to survive, maybe we should see what would happen if we avoided the Ice Age altogether. Ice ages are triggered by several things. One key factor is how far away the Earth is from the Sun, because this impacts the amount of heat Earth receives. Then there are shifts in plate tectonics affecting the movement of land masses and the flow of ocean currents on Earth. So what if this ice age never happened? Well, massive volcanic eruptions could have warmed Earth. This happens if they throw large amounts of greenhouse gases like water vapor and carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. So how about the kind of volcanic action that led to a massive heat spike 56 million years ago? At that time, Earth suddenly got super hot. Massive amounts of carbon dioxide entered the atmosphere, raising the temperature by up to 8 degrees Celsius. The seas also became incredibly warm. In the tropics, it was like a warm bathtub with temperatures around 38 degrees Celsius. Maybe this could have offset the coming ice age, but on the other hand, this heat spike also caused a bunch of creatures to go extinct. So it's not clear if this would have been a sure way to save the Megalodon. So we're going to have to look for another miracle to save the Meg. Could the Meg have survived the ice age some other way? After all, many other species did. Great white sharks made it through, so did gray whales. So, are there traits that the Meg could have borrowed to make it through this time? The Meg found it difficult to compete with great white sharks for food because the Meg was 3 times larger. The Meg's metabolic requirements would have been significantly higher to maintain that body weight. At the same time, it would have made them less nimble than the great white shark. One solution? The Meg needed to adapt with the times, shrink a little. Maybe the Meg could have borrowed a trait from the skate. This is another fish made of cartilage, just like the Megalodon. Winter skate living in Canada have shrunk their body size 45% in response to water temperatures going up 10%. And this didn't take them millions of years. This was a response to environmental changes, not a result of gradual natural selection. And the knowledge to do this can be preserved in sharks' genomes. Some sharks have very large genomes containing traits that they can draw on when they need, kind of like a fire extinguisher stored away in a glass box to break open during an emergency. So let's give the Meg this kind of fancy genome. Okay, so now as the ice sets in, our Meg has shrunk. It's 55% as large as it used to be. Don't worry, this change isn't going to last forever. It's just an adaptation the Megalodon will make to get through the ice age. Now that it's smaller, its energy needs are lower, and it's better able to compete with those vicious great white sharks. I told you earlier that adult megs were solitary creatures. Well, that was fine when they were super large. They could bash other large creatures with their superior weight, but now that we've shrunk the meg down a bit, it's going to need some other strategies. To further help our megs survive, we're going to take a lesson from killer whales. They're going to form a pod. Maybe the megs would mimic a behavioral feature of transient orcas. These form smaller pods of up to 5 individuals, which are mainly geared towards hunting. This would be in line with the solitary nature of the adult Megalodon, while at the same time incorporating a behavioral feature that helps the meg to survive. And while it's doing that, it's going to diversify its diet. It's no longer just baleen whales. Meg, you're going to eat squid, fish, and any other marine animal you come across. This broad diversification of diet helped the orcas survive the last ice age, and it'll help the meg get through it too. Sharks actually have a super efficient digestive system that makes use of almost everything they eat. Because of this feature, shark poop mostly looks like goo. That's all that's left at the end of digestion after they squeeze all the nutrients out. And now the meg's goo is going to have even more variety. Good. Next, we'll make the meg omnivorous. This is a trait we'll take from the bonnethead shark. So occasionally the meg will eat some seagrass when it needs to survive. Okay, so now we have a smaller meg, one that hunts in packs and eats a more diverse diet. This meg is better suited to ward off the threat from great white sharks. And as baleen whales die out, this meg has other stuff to eat. Okay, I'm feeling pretty good about our meg's chances. But there's one more modification we need to make. We'd like to give the Megalodon an additional feature to help it in colder waters. The meg already was partially warm-blooded, but it definitely preferred warm subtropical waters. A cold water adaptation would definitely help it survive the future ice ages. So we'll borrow another feature from the whale. We'll give it a thick layer of blubber. This will serve as insulation when waters become super chilly. Okay, are we done? Well, no. Maybe just one more thing. During the Pleistocene Ice Age, the meg's babies suffered when water receded from the nurseries on the shore. So maybe a change to where the meg gives birth to its babies would be a good adaptation. For this, we want to borrow a secret from the white shark. Where the white shark gives birth is a mystery to scientists. There are theories that white sharks give birth far out in the water. This trait would have made their babies less vulnerable to the shifting shoreline as the ice ages came and went. If the meg could adopt this trait, well, it would ensure the survival of the next generation. Okay, so I think our refurbished meg, I'm going to call it Meg 2.0, is now equipped to take on pretty much anything Mother Nature throws at it. Time for you to jump into the time machine and see how the new meg fares with this ice age. Then we'll come back to the modern day. Over the course of the next 7,000 years, you'll see the Megalodon, with its new, larger genome, draw on specific traits to shrink its size. It's now about 50% of what it used to be. Still larger than the great white sharks, but with lower feeding and energy requirements than before. The baleen whales have gone extinct, but the meg is happy to sink its teeth into any creature. Squids, seals, they're all fair game. The white sharks find their old enemy is smaller and more nimble, and they're surprised that the meg is now hunting in a pod of 4 or 5. White sharks can't get close as a group of megs are circling their prey. Just like before, a blow is dealt from beneath, and then, before you know it, the rest of the megs have pounced on the desperate victim, tearing it to shreds. The white sharks are the losers in the fight with Megalodon 2.0. They pick their spots, but stay clear of direct competition in order to survive. As the Pleistocene era continues, the Earth goes through multiple glaciation cycles. In addition to its partial warm-bloodedness, the additional layer of blubber that Meg 2.0 has enabled it to survive as Earth's waters turned cold. height of the Ice Age, the Meg migrates to the warmest waters it can find, around the tropics and subtropics. This was a strategy used by orcas, many of which survived in the warmer waters around Africa during the Ice Age. As Megs from different parts of the globe migrate to these regions to weather the cold, the gene pool becomes more diverse. 13,000 years ago. Okay, while megafauna are going extinct on land because of both shifts in climate and human predators, you can see Meg 2.0, King of the Oceans, is able to survive these shifts. Adapted to both warm and cold waters, and with its new layer of blubber, it seeks refuge in deep, cold waters to survive human hunting expeditions. It gives birth to babies deep in the sea, far from human eyes. 11,700 years ago. Okay, the last Ice Age ends. The Megalodon undergoes a new shift. Its DNA recognizes a change in the environment, signaling that it can grow larger again. In a few thousand years, it doubles its size, and it's back to where it was 2.6 million years ago. There's a lot of food in the oceans. Its hunting strategy is flawless, and its secretive breeding approach ensures the survival of new baby Megs. New generations of the Meg grow bigger and stronger. The Meg reaches a staggering 200 tons. It's 30 meters long, and its teeth are longer and sharper than ever before. Everything in the ocean and on land fears this creature. This is Meg 2.0, the unchallenged king of the oceans. Whales won't be able to grow to the massive size they do today. The Meg's voracious appetite keeps them in check. Modern era. In the 19th and 20th century, humans hunt whales, but they learned to stay clear of the Megalodon. If hunting boats go after them, a pack of Meg 2.0s swarm around the boats and destroy them, attacking in a coordinated effort. The lessons from fighting great white sharks 2.6 million years ago come in handy for this predator. Today, for humans, swimming in the ocean comes with a warning. You may be attacked by a stray Megalodon 2.0. Only swim in areas where lifeguards are around, but I'm not sure they'll be much help. The Meg 2.0 is somewhat misunderstood. It's not that this massive shark targets humans as a food source. After all, the Meg needs 3,600 kilograms of food a day. That means it would have to eat 45 to 60 humans in order to make a meal of us. But that doesn't mean they wouldn't still want to eat you if given the chance. And if the water's choppy and humans are splashing about, a stray Meg floating along might mistake a human for a smaller fish. Chomp. But once it realizes you're not a fish, the Meg might back away and try to find something more nutritious. Fishing boats will need to steer clear of the Meg as well. The Meg 2.0 will be dominating the oceans and most popular fishing spots. And it wouldn't take kindly to any competition, even the humankind. These are the areas modern fishing boats would have to fear and avoid, and if they don't, they might end up getting attacked. This could also affect our ability to fish. Maybe sushi would eventually be off the menu in certain parts of the world. With a creature as dominant as the Megalodon, fishing may become a lot more rare for us humans. But that's if we choose not to fight back. Maybe we'll end up hunting down Megalodons, if we're given the right technology. Or we'll just stay clear of the areas the Meg hunts in. If the Meg were around today, it would be at the top of the marine food chain. As apex predators, they'd keep populations of fish under control. But would the Meg be able to dominate forever? The only thing that threatens their future would be decreasing food in our oceans. With climate change and the oceans becoming more acidic, the marine life that the Meg depends on are dying out. But sea levels are rising. Warm waters are no longer confined to the tropics. The warmth is migrating northward and southward. As sea levels rise to engulf Bangladesh today, Venice tomorrow, will Meg 2.0 have to change its feeding strategy? In a weird and completely unexpected turn of events, will a species of meg break off and become vegetarian, eating seagrasses to survive? Or will it ride the warm waters to attack coastal populations of humans? Okay, you got your mosasaurus fix, your megalodon fix, freaks? Good. A little later in the show, we're going to introduce you to some animals that were even scarier than the dinosaurs. And plus, we'll look in on the age of giant insects. Watch for me to freak out on that one. You know, one place that already has giant insects is Australia. Australia is known for its diverse and dangerous wildlife, or to put it another way, it's filled with scary animals. If you think the beasts in Australia are scary in this day and age, well, imagine what deadly beasts were living there in prehistoric times. Have a look. Welcome to Prehistoric Australia, a place that was filled with dangerous and terrifying megafauna. This was a time of giant kangaroos, mega marsupial lions, super long snakes, and terrifying birds. If you think Australia is scary today, just wait until we go back 100,000 years. Almost everything wanted you dead. But humans did manage to live side by side with these creatures and survive. But how? In this episode, we'll explore how humans survived during this era and whether or not we were the cause of these creatures' extinctions. This is What If, and here's what would happen if you lived in prehistoric Australia. You've arrived in the midst of the late Pleistocene era, which ran from 126,000 to 12,000 years ago. Once you land on the Australian shores, you'll be met with some massive and terrifying beasts. Let's take a look at some of the most terrifying ones. Don't look now, but behind you is the Diprotodon, the biggest marsupial that ever roamed the earth. This particular specimen is coming in at 3.8 meters long and 1.8 meters high. It weighs as much as a car. Its big head comes with an enormous mouth, powerful jaws, and upper incisors the size of bananas. It uses all these to maintain its diet, but would that include you? Well, good news, you'll be safe from this guy because the Diprotodon is a herbivore, one that eats an unbelievable amount of fibrous plant matter, including branches, leaves, shrubs, and stems. Up to 100 kilograms of plant matter on a daily basis. This binge eating had a huge impact on the environment, but in a good way. The Diprotodon would eat and of course, poop, dispersing plant seeds far and wide. Because this creature ate so much food, it needed to have a pretty massive head. If it hadn't been for one odd evolutionary trait, it might not have been able to lift it up off the ground. The Diprotodon was lucky enough to have a skull full of air pockets, making it much lighter to lift. They lived all over Australia, except Tasmania. Some scientists believe there's a possibility they might have been migratory creatures. If that's true, they would have been the only marsupials to behave that way. Okay, time to meet another creature from prehistoric Australia. This time, it's a lot scarier. It's a huge goanna. This gigantic monitor lizard, called the Megalodon prisca, is the largest land-based lizard of all time. It was a ferocious reptilian predator, a carnivore that ate large mammals, snakes, birds, and other reptiles, so it's probably a good idea to stay clear of this guy. This lizard could grow as long as 5 meters and weighed up to 575 kilograms. If you look closely at its snout, you'll see an unusual crest. This snout housed some scary sharp teeth that curved backward. This goanna was both an ambush predator and a scavenger. It would lay in wait for its next victim, innocent kangaroos, deer, wild pigs, maybe even you. Then it would pounce. Its toxic saliva would first cause an infection and shortly after, death. This guy is still around today. Sort of. You can see relatives of the Megalonia in reptiles like the Komodo dragon, but its closest relative is another lizard in Australia, the Parenti. At least this one isn't as massive. If you think this giant lizard is bad, just wait until you see what we have next. Time to check out another beast, this time a non-venomous one, a giant snake called the Wonambi. Wonambi like to live in the cool and dry regions of Australia. Now, I just told you it's non-venomous, but you'd probably want to stay away from it anyway. Like the Megalonia, it was an ambush predator, and it liked to kill its prey by squeezing them to death. If you're wandering around prehistoric Australia, you might encounter it hanging out by a watering hole. Usually it goes after kangaroos and wallabies who are stopping by for a drink. The Wonambi like to wrap its 4 to 6 meter long body tightly around you until you stop breathing. Luckily, these snakes aren't around anymore. So, these megafauna were living in Australia all throughout the Pleistocene period, from 2.5 million years ago. But if we fast forward 40,000 to 60,000 years ago, something terrible happens. The megafauna go extinct. Just a little before the extinctions occurred, a new apex predator arrived on land. Was it some new, terrible, and scary beast? No, it was just us humans. If you were around during this time, you would have been part of the earliest Australians on the continent. They arrived maybe 65,000 years ago, coming by boat to northern Australia and then quickly spreading around the coast and into the interior. Which brings us to two important questions. First, how did humans survive these dangerous megafauna? Well, early humans were armed with two critical weapons to survive living amongst these creatures: fire and hunting weapons. Scientists have found megafauna remains while looking at old Aboriginal settlements. One of the weapons of choice to fend off these megafauna may have been sharpened bones. But that's not all. It's also suspected that these early humans developed the use of nets to capture some of these creatures. Since they moved so fast, it would have been difficult to spear them effectively, but flinging a net over them, well, that could be an easy and effective way to slow them down and then go in for the kill. To further protect yourself during this time, you'd want to build a shelter. Rock and bone shelters were a popular choice in prehistoric Australia, because they could prevent animals from getting in and eating you. These structures were also essential to protect you from the environment. Australia during this time had different temperatures, geographies, and climates. Humans mostly settled around the coast, which had savanna-like climates and occasional rainfalls. If you moved inland, you'd be met with harsher, desert-like regions. There were limited water sources, made for a tough environment for humans to survive in. But less water actually benefited the early humans, since it made it easier to travel all around Australia. Land bridges were exposed, helping humans migrate to new places and survive these terrifying megafauna. What other animals did they have to survive against? Well, hopefully something a little friendlier this time. If you try going into a lake for a swim, you might encounter the ruthless freshwater crocodile. This giant beast was up to 5 meters long and was nicknamed the Swamp King. Its prey were creatures coming for water at mud springs or innocent humans stopping for a swim. The freshwater crocodile was built to be a ferocious predator. It had deeper and wider jaws than modern saltwater crocodiles. Today, its closest living relative is the Indo-Pacific crocodile, which can grow up to 6 meters. But the old Swamp King was bulkier than this modern-day croc and had a bigger snout. Okay, let's get away from this croc and go find... Any guesses? Yeah, another terrifying creature that wants to kill you. And this one might be the scariest yet. If we swoop down into one of the ancient forests, we're going to see a pretty unusual lion-type predator, the Thylacoleo. This wasn't like a lion you'd find at the zoo. It was a carnivorous marsupial, like a cross between a kangaroo and a deadly cat, fully equipped with a pouch to carry its young. It's known as one of the most destructive predatory beasts ever, and there's a good reason for that description. Scientists have found that the Thylacoleo had a bite strength of 250 kilograms. Though it scavenged when it got a chance, it was an ambush predator, equipped with some of the fiercest teeth ever seen for effective killing. Large serrated upper incisors and enlarged cheek teeth helped it tear apart its prey. Plus, like my cute little house cat, it had a thumb claw in a sheath. But unlike my kitty, this claw was very large and may have been used to disembowel its victims. With these teeth and powerful bite, the Thylacoleo could have taken on almost any creature. If you encountered this predator in the Australian outback, there's one saving grace. It wasn't the fastest runner. So if you see this beast, get running. Run as fast and as long as you can, and don't try to climb up a tree because this beast was well equipped for that. Now, there's a lot of debate as to what this creature's total diet consisted of. Its ancestors were herbivores, so there's some speculation that this marsupial lion also enjoyed a salad with its steak. Other yummy parts of its diet included crocodile eggs and bone marrow. Under the melon muncher hypothesis, some have speculated that the Thylacoleo ate native cucumbers, but somehow I just can't imagine this beast feasting on a jar of garlic dills. Thylacoleo didn't have the kind of grinding teeth we normally see in herbivores, so if it ate the odd plant or the odd cuke, it would likely only have been once in a while. It would much rather dine on you. Okay, let's check out another nightmarish creature, the thunderbird. This bird stood over 2 meters high and had these giant hind legs. The only issue? Well, it was also equipped with teeny tiny wings, so it couldn't fly. It's kind of cute now that you look at it. This bird weighed a lot, around 220 to 240 kilograms. And naturally, its eggs were pretty darn heavy too, coming in at over 1.5 kilograms. The Thunderbird made up for its lack of flight by being a super fast runner. Pair that with its powerful beak, and would it want to have you for breakfast? Thankfully not, as it was probably a herbivore. Finally, something that doesn't want you dead. Phew. Is the Thunderbird still around today? Yeah, sort of. Its ancestors are today's ducks and geese. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. Now, remember, there are two key questions during this time. We now know how humans survived prehistoric Australia, but we also know that, sadly, the megafauna died out. So the second question is, what made the megafauna go extinct? Is it humans? Or something else? Well, different scientists subscribe to different theories on this. And speaking of which, you should subscribe to our Patreon. There, you can watch episodes like this one early and ad-free. You also get front-of-the-line access to our Discord, where you can pitch us your own what-if ideas. Okay, enough shelling. How did the megafauna go extinct? Well, according to one theory, sometimes referred to as the Blitzkrieg theory, the early Australians slaughtered all the animals from the late Pleistocene era. They went extinct within 1,000 years. Those who subscribe to this theory argue that it would have taken a few thousand years for humans to establish themselves and spread out across the continent. That's why we see an overlap between the two, but humans would have been gradually eating and killing off these megafauna during that time. Killing off the entire species in just 1,000 years seems a little wonky. Okay, now let's revisit the thunderbirds we met earlier because they carry a clue. Scientists have been studying burn patterns on eggshell fossils. What caused them? Humans? Nature? They've concluded that the burns were not from natural fires, so there's some evidence that humans played a hand in these birds' fate. And looking at humans' destructive behavior nowadays, it's easy enough to believe that it's the humans who were responsible. But there's also evidence disproving this theory. First off, some scientists argue that a lot of the megafauna, maybe up to 85%, were already extinct before humans got there. But most important, fossils of megafauna have been found that date to periods well after humans arrived on the scene. This proves that humans and these giant beasts coexisted for a long time, anywhere from 10,000 to 30,000 years of overlap. This indicates that while early humans might have hunted these large beasts, they did it in a sustainable way. If this is true and humans were hunting sustainably, there's got to be something else that was deadly to the megafauna. It's something we're very familiar with today: climate change. As the last ice age began to thaw, it would have had huge implications on habitats. The critical period for Australian fauna would have been around 30,000 years ago. Some scientists who've studied climate change have noticed that things were getting warmer and drier as the ice age came to an end. Let's visit a spot in Australia called Cuddle Springs. Despite what the name suggests, it's not a hot spot for cuddling, but it is a spot where different kinds of megafauna fossils can be found. Comparing fossils from 500,000 years ago with those from about 40,000 years ago, scientists found that the older creatures ate greens that indicated a much wetter climate. The 40,000-year-old specimens had to settle for plants that grew in much drier environments. As a result, the later megafauna gave up eating saltbush, a shrub that the older megafauna had enjoyed. These creatures figured out that when there isn't enough water to go around, you need to limit your salt intake. Anyone who's bought the extra large popcorn and the small Coke Zero knows that. And this tracks with what we know about the climate. Toward the end of the Pleistocene, Ice Age glaciers melted as the planet warmed. This, in turn, impacted plants and shrubs and affected the megafauna. The drying out of the environment, a higher frequency of fires, and the disappearance of grasslands, changes in vegetation, may have led many of these creatures to go extinct. The scientists in the Blitzkrieg camp have a response to this view on climate change. They argue that the climate has been going through cold and dry, alternating with warm and wet cycles over and over again for the last 2.5 million years, and yet the megafauna had survived those cycles multiple times. It was only when humans landed on the scene that the megafauna were unable to cope with climate change. So they may have a point. For sure, the argument isn't settled yet. It could be humans who made the megafauna extinct, or it may have been the environment. Or maybe it was something somewhere in between. The one thing we know for sure is that humans are powerful predators with an unmatched ability to impact our environment. We're seeing that today as the temperature continues to rise relentlessly due to human-induced warming. Humans are both incredible creators and destroyers. What if the dinosaurs that went extinct 66 million years ago were able to survive the asteroid? Well, with a few evolutionary modifications, anything is possible. Today, we're going to modify the dinosaurs that went extinct, giving them all new traits in order to survive. Some might get big, some might be small, and some will even get extreme rock armor, capable of surviving the asteroid impact. This is What If, and here's what would happen if dinosaurs had evolved to survive the asteroid. Okay, first, let's revisit the mass extinction event that got us here in the first place, because clues to dinosaurs' survival lie at the scene of the crime. Why is that? Well, because we know some animals survived. While 75% of all species on Earth were wiped out, 25% found a way. What special superpower did each survivor have? Was it their bodies? Was it what they ate or how they lived? And keep in mind, it wasn't just the initial impact that did all the damage. There was a second extinction event right after. This killer asteroid starts as a small dot in the sky, but before you know it, a massive rock has struck Earth, creating a huge crater. The enormous force from the asteroid created a tremendous amount of heat. It was like billions of nuclear bombs exploding. The heat raised the temperature of the land, and it caused the rocks underneath the Earth to melt, tossing tiny molten particles into the air. These rained back down as hot, deadly shards. A massive impact, a super hot Earth, and molten rock rain. Well, that's the first killer. And then, for those that somehow survived this, there was a second horror on the way. The massive cloud of ash that enveloped the Earth blocked out the sun, causing an impact winter. This lasted anywhere from 2 to 10 years. No sunlight or food for many of the creatures on Earth. This would have been a nightmare to get through, but some animals did manage to survive. Shrews, turtles, crocodiles, and some other creatures were able to get through both of these extinction events. So, if we applied some of their survival traits to the dinosaurs, would the dinosaurs be able to avoid getting wiped out? Okay, it's time to do a little gene splicing. Let's take a look at our favorite dinosaurs and see how they might have evolved to survive the asteroid. From T-Rex to Tiny Rex. Okay, let's start with my favorite, the Tyrannosaurus Rex. Weighing in at 7,000 kilograms, the T-Rex had a pretty difficult time surviving the asteroid. As terrestrial creatures, many T-Rexes would have died in the original heat pulse that radiated through Earth. Either that, or they would have been shredded by the rain of molten rock coming down from the sky. Well, not this time. We're going to help the T-Rex survive. We'll take some lessons from the Morgan eucodon, a small mammal that lived in burrows and scurried around underfoot during the age of dinosaurs. We'll give our T-Rex some really thick armor all over its body to combat the hail of shards. And those puny arms? Well, let's beef them up a bit by increasing their length and size, as well as giving them some bigger claws. This would allow them to dig burrows for extra protection. Will this be enough? Well, let's see what happens when the asteroid strikes again. Our modified T-Rex looks to be doing great. The heavy armor is protecting him from the shards, and he's running into his burrow for shelters. He's 12 meters long, so this burrow is a bit on the big side, but so far so good. Okay, now that the initial impact is over, a heat wave is happening. Widespread fires are raging across Earth. Our T-Rex, though, is still comfortable, hiding in his burrow, waiting for the fires to end. Now, although the T-Rex had a high energy requirement and had to eat relatively frequently, he should be able to survive a bit of starvation for now. I mean, a hungry stomach beats going extinct, right? After the initial devastation subsides, our T-Rex emerges from his burrow, only to find that Earth is now 6 degrees colder and much darker. This means finding food is going to be a huge issue. At first, our T-Rex could scavenge some asteroid kill, but with most other large land creatures now gone, how would this enormous carnivore survive? Well, it's going to be virtually impossible without food. That is, unless we give our T-Rex one more modification. Unfortunately, it'll change almost everything we know about this dominant dino. Let me explain. Almost every creature that survived the impact winter had this one common feature. They were on the smaller side. In fact, of the mammals that survived, the largest one was no bigger than a rat. So, sorry Rexy, but we're gonna have to shrink you down from a size 16 to a size 0. Okay, now you're Tiny Rex. And oh, one more thing, we're also going to modify your diet drastically. You're going to be an insectivore. Since there are no large herbivores to eat, you'll have to settle for feeding off the swampy carcasses of insects. Oh, how the mighty have fallen. But at least he should survive. Let's see what happens when the asteroid strikes again. Okay, Tiny Rex runs into its burrow like before and stays there for a while. It's now safe to come out. For a while, he's able to sustain himself on the remains of dead animals. And after that, well, there are swarms of insects hovering over the decaying vegetation everywhere. That's what our Tiny Rex eats. And he survives long enough to pass his genes on to the next generation, giving rise to a new generation of armored, burrowing insectivores. Tiny Rexes. Honestly, they're pretty cute. Toothless Velociraptor. All right, let's look at another star of the Jurassic Age, Velociraptors. what would it take for them to survive? Well, these dinosaurs lived in Central and Eastern Asia during the late Cretaceous period. They were about 1.8 meters long and weighed about 45 kilograms, about as much as a chimpanzee. They were pretty good at pouncing quickly on their prey and liked eating small herbivores. There's one other feature that they had that's given us an idea to build on, and that's that velociraptors had fluffy, feathery arms. Now, you might be thinking, why didn't I see that in Jurassic Park? Well, when the movie was made, scientists hadn't yet figured out that dinosaurs had feathers. Now, velociraptors had one other feature just like birds. They had thin, hollow bones filled with air sacs, a powerful mechanism for staying well oxygenated. They could get oxygen both while inhaling and exhaling. Now, despite all this, unfortunately, they couldn't fly, which may have been a key factor in their downfall. All right, time for us to give our velociraptors a few key modifications that could help them avoid extinction. Now, similar to our T-Rex, we'll shrink them down. Then, we're going to give them wings so they can take flight when the asteroid strikes. This was one of the reasons birds survived. Some of them were able to fly away and avoid the initial blast. But just being able to fly won't be enough. These creatures will have to adapt and find food to survive the impact winter. What would they eat? Well, we'll have to give our velociraptors a taste for bird food. They could swoop down and prey on the small mammals scurrying about. Or they could search for seeds and nuts, which will still be around after the massive fires. Now, to pick those seeds out from dead forests, we'd better give them a beak, too, a key evolutionary advantage. And sorry, velociraptors, but we're getting rid of your teeth. In this new post-apocalyptic world, you're not going to need them. This will make sure you live to see another day. Yeah, this toothless velociraptor with its wings is definitely making it through the asteroid. Okay, so we've looked at the land and at the air. Well, now it's time to look at the sea. Michael Spinosaurus Phelps. The Spinosaurus was a large, semi-aquatic dinosaur with a massive sail on its back. It's kind of an odd-looking creature, 15.5 meters long with small hind legs, a predator who swam after fish. It wasn't really well adapted to land. In fact, this dinosaur was already extinct by the time the asteroid hit. But let's assume for a moment that it was around during the late Cretaceous period, because we think with a few modifications, we could help it survive the asteroid. And this time, we're going to look for some aspects of a creature that survived all 5 mass extinctions. The sharks, and you'll see why in a second. Unlike the shark, the sad thing about the Spinosaurus, well, it was a crappy swimmer. The fin on its back was seriously destabilizing. It made for a very difficult swim. Okay, so that 335 kilogram big back fin, it's gotta go. Or maybe become a much smaller dorsal fin. Let's streamline its body and shrink it a bit while we're at it, so it can glide, kind of like Michael Phelps. Now, another problem with the Spinosaurus? Well, we've got to swap out its whole breathing mechanism. Like the Velociraptor, it has lungs and a network of sacs inundating its hollow bones. We're going to replace this whole system with gills, and not your standard 5 gills, but a set of 7, so it can get enough oxygen whether it's in shallow water or the deepest ocean. Now, finally, we'll give our Spinosaurus a swim bladder. It's a gas-filled sac which it can inflate or deflate whenever it likes. This way it can roam through different depths of the ocean. But one last trait before we go. The Spinosaurus was known for only eating a couple of things during its time. Well, our Spinosaurus, it can't be such a picky eater. Whether it's turtles or shellfish, sea snakes or smaller Spinosauruses, they're gonna eat whatever's served for dinner. Okay, our new and modified Michael Spinosaurus Phelps is all set, built to survive the asteroid. It'll dive deep when the top layers overheat, it can swim near and far, and In the beginning, it'll eat all the dead fish that sink to the bottom. Later, it'll eat anything. We're good to go. The butt-breathing Ankylosaurus. Okay, time for our last bit of genetic splicing. Now, sharks survived, but turtles did too. Is there a dino that could learn a few evolutionary tricks from the turtle or the crocodile? Well, let's look at the Ankylosaurus, the armored dinosaur with bony plates on its body and a powerful club-like tail. These large beasts were herbivores, eating tough leaves, pulpy fruits, ferns, and shrubs. They were also super slow-moving creatures. But come to think of it, that might actually be a good thing, because being sluggish is part of the evolutionary success story of both the turtle and the crocodile. For the Ankylosaurus to survive the asteroid, we're going to need one major change. Instead of being strictly land dinos, we're going to need them to be semi-aquatic. Now, coincidentally, semi-aquatic was my favorite 90s band. Oh, wait, that was Semisonic. Okay, in the hours after the asteroid strikes, as the Earth becomes super hot, we need a few Ankylosauruses near the shore to slip into the water. Now, they don't need gills, but like a turtle, we'll make them good at holding their breath underwater for a long time, like 45 minutes. This will get them through the first phase, when Earth is scalding hot. Now, given that any kind of food is going to be a problem for a while after the impact, our Ankylosaurus already has the evolutionary trait that's going to help it survive. Yeah, its sluggishness is just what we need right now. Just like a turtle, the less energy it uses, the longer it can go without food. Now, in addition, let's make our Ankylosaurus cold-blooded, so its body temperature is determined by its environment. This way, as the Earth gets colder during the impact winter, the Ankylosaurus's temperature can drop too, and its metabolism can slow further. The less energy it needs, the better. Maybe it hangs out underwater for a bit, brumating. This is the type of hibernation turtles do. And this is where the last body feature comes in. We're going to modify our Ankylosaurus so it can breathe through its butt. Yeah, I know it sounds ridiculous and sounds like maybe something Beavis and Butthead would say, but stick with me here. Turtles have cloaca, openings through which waste comes out. You know, they're rich in blood vessels, so they double up as a way to get oxygen when the turtle is underwater. Brumating. There you have it. A new generation of butt-breathing Ankylosauruses, which are semi-aquatic. They're also sluggish, cold-blooded, and can retreat underwater to brumate. And this is all happening as they're protected by their bony plates. Maybe they'll curl their tail under their armor for protection when they sleep. So, now that these dinosaurs managed to avoid extinction, what does the future of Earth and mammals look like? Well, what was formerly known as the T-Rex is now equivalent to a small reptile, one that feeds on insects to survive. Not scary. Our toothless velociraptors continued to evolve, along with birds, and in the ocean, Michael Spinosaurus Phelps could evolve into a powerful fish, competing with big sharks and whales. The new butt-breathing Anky, well, it doesn't scare anyone either. Think of it as a new kind of elephant-like creature, docile and relatively harmless. Hundreds of thousands of years later, the dinosaurs that survived, along with the mammals entering the scene, would continue to evolve side by side. By wiping out the larger creatures and shrinking the T-Rex, the mammals and dinosaurs of the time would be on a more even footing. But Tiny Rex lacks one important thing: a big brain. Aww. Other small mammals at the time, like rats and squirrels, would be significantly smarter than Tiny Rex. They'd also have better senses, ones that could allow them to get around in the dark better. So there is a possibility that the Tiny Rex would go extinct due to the stiff competition at the time. But let's assume they're able to still evolve. Similar to our own timeline, future generations of mammals would have evolved into intelligent apes. Tiny Rex might have become middleweight Rex by this point. like maybe elephant or hippo-sized. But there's a good chance that the smart apes would escape from middleweight Rex just by living high up in the trees. Then we'd get to humans, eventually giving rise to humans. Now, in the early years, humans would hide from heavyweight Rex, but over time we'd invent weapons and begin to hunt them. Now, would our re-engineered dinosaurs ever grow to be as large as they were in the Cretaceous period? Give them another 100 million years and they just might.
This is the Titanoboa, one of the largest and deadliest snakes to ever exist. It went extinct 55 million years ago, but what if that never happened? What if the Titanoboa just kept evolving and was alive today? What special traits would this deadly creature have? And how big could it get? This is What If, and here's what would happen if the Titanoboa never stopped evolving. Okay, before we look at the modern day Titanoboa, we need to go back. 60 million years ago, the Titanoboa lived in the tropical waters of South America, arriving on the scene after the dinosaurs went extinct. It was a major predator of its time. This snake was unimaginably large. It had a girth of about 1 meter. That means if it were slithering on the ground toward you, it would come up to your waist. It was 14 to 15 meters long, and it weighed over 1,000 kilograms. Luckily, the Titanoboa wasn't venomous, but don't let that trick you into believing it was safe. It had a different way of killing its victims, by squeezing the life out of them. Literally, by wrapping itself around your body or squeezing your windpipe, and then swallowing you whole. And if you tried to slip out, you'd be met with rows of sharp little teeth that would dig into you. But you could see this creature coming, right? No, not a chance. The Titanoboa was the perfect color, a color that allowed it to camouflage itself in its swampy environment. It would sit and wait for the perfect moment to strike. It feasted mainly on fish, turtles, and crocodiles. So, if the Titanoboa was so dominant, what finally made it go extinct? Well, it had to do with a massive change in climate. But to understand this, let's first dive into what made the Titanoboa such a dominant creature, and then how it suddenly went extinct. Paleocene, 66 million years ago to 56 million years ago. Titanoboas emerged after the apex predator niche was left empty by the extinction of the dinosaurs. They thrived in hot and humid environments. Lucky for them, that's what Earth happened to be like 60 million years ago. The average temperature was around 24-25 degrees Celsius. Now, we love that temperature in the summer, but imagine if it were that way the whole year. Instead of ice caps, the poles were covered with forests, and instead of polar bears, there were alligators roaming around. Just like today, a planet even a few degrees hotter is very unpleasant for human beings, so it's a good thing we weren't around at that time. But there's a set of animals that thrive in the heat, cold-blooded ones. Our Titanoboa was cold-blooded, so it loved warm weather. Unlike warm-blooded creatures, cold-blooded animals aren't able to regulate their own body temperature. They use heat from the environment to warm up their bodies and kick their metabolism into a higher gear. So a warmer Earth was perfect for the Titanoboa. It had a supply of external energy to keep its body warm, hunt without mercy, and become one of the largest predators ever. But then the Titanoboa went extinct. Why? Well, a lot of changes were happening at this time. The Earth experienced two very different climate shifts. First, it became very hot, and then it cooled down. With our current evidence, it's not clear if the Titanoboa became extinct during the heat spike or during the cooling phase. So let's look at each change and try and figure out what might have happened. The heat spike event, 56 million years ago. It was 56 million years ago that Earth suddenly got super hot. The official name for this heat spike is the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, or PETM for short. Massive amounts of carbon dioxide entered the atmosphere, raising the temperature by up to 8 degrees Celsius. The seas became really hot. In the tropics, it was like a warm bathtub with temperatures around 38 degrees Celsius. There was a mass extinction of creatures in the deep sea. In particular, many single-celled creatures called forams died out. Now, for the Titanoboa, this may have resulted in two different outcomes. It's possible that this giant snake thrived in hot water and became larger. Even if some fish were dying, other reptiles like turtles and crocodiles could have also grown big with the heat and became a great food source for the Titanoboa. So in this scenario, our Titanoboa just gets bigger and badder during the heat spike. But there's another possibility. Maybe the Titanoboa went extinct due to the warmer temperatures. Because the heat spike was so sudden, oceans absorbing carbon dioxide would have become more acidic. Many fish may have died in that acidic warm water, which would have meant fewer fish for the Titanoboa to eat. Now, if this were the case, the Titanoboa would have needed to adapt to survive. What evolutionary change could have helped it survive this heat spike? Well, if the tropical waters were too hot and acidic to live in, moving onto land would have been Titanoboa's best bet. Yeah, switching from a mostly pescatarian diet to being a meat eater. Now, as Earth became warmer, something interesting was happening. Above the waterline, the land was exploding with different types of mammals. Camels, horses, pigs, goats, and giraffes all evolved when Earth was a giant sauna. So, if Titanoboa moved from water to land, it would have found some new foods to keep it going. But because of its large size, living on land would have been difficult. So our Titanoboa would need a different kind of adaptation to get through this temperature spike. The giant snake is going to get some stronger swimming muscles and swim up to the poles, because now the poles have warmed up so much that they're tropical. The ice melted into water and the polar seas were full of crocodiles, the perfect lunch for a hungry Titanoboa. Eocene and Oleocene, 56 million years ago to 23 million years ago. Okay, after 200,000 years, the heat spike was finally over and temperatures went back to what they were before. But another major shift in climate is on the way, a cooling. Around 50 million years ago, temperatures began dropping in a long-term cooling trend that lasted until the dawn of civilization. The once lush forests at the poles are now becoming ice caps. This was bad news for the Titanoboa. The cooler climate didn't suit this cold-blooded snake. It could no longer get the heat it needed from the environment to be able to power itself. It's possible that this led to the Titanoboa's extinction about 55 million years ago. In order to survive, it would have had to evolve in a different and totally unexpected way. In our hypothetical scenario, the Titanoboa becomes warm-blooded. Maybe you're thinking, well, can a cold-blooded animal really become warm-blooded? Well, how is that even possible? Well, it's true that if we look at snakes, we don't see any examples of them being warm-blooded, but there is another category of cold-blooded creatures that have some warm-blooded exceptions. Fish. While the majority of fish are cold-blooded, about 0.1% are partially or fully warm-blooded. For instance, the moonfish is warm-blooded. Bluefin tuna, white sharks, and salmon sharks are kind of both. They use a special mechanism to raise their body temperature called vascular countercurrent heat exchange. Let me show you how it works. Let's use a shark as an example. Now, the muscles they use to swim generate heat, which heats blood in the veins. The arteries bring cold, oxygenated blood from the gills to the shark's muscles and organs. This cold blood picks up the heat from blood in the veins, which then raises the shark's internal temperature. But in the Titanoboa's case, there are no gills involved. It breathes in through its nostrils and has lungs to supply it with oxygen. But we can make it warm-blooded like the shark by having cold blood pumped in through the arteries, which then pick up the heat from the warm blood in the veins. This single evolutionary transformation would allow the Titanoboa to survive the mass cooling. Let's see what happens next. Miocene, 23 million years ago to 5 million years ago. During the Miocene epoch that followed, Earth began to warm a little, followed again by a period of cooling. The climate became drier and vegetation was more coarse. Rhinos were dominant in North America. Many species of horses evolved, as did a variety of camels. Also, a saber-toothed cat-like creature called the Nimravid roamed around. Could the Titanoboa have adapted in new and different ways to spawn a line of desert Titanoboas? Yeah, I know I said that living on land would be tough for such a massive creature, but maybe there's an evolutionary path to make this possible. To camouflage in the desert, it would need to adapt a new color scheme, a light sandy color. And its next most important adaptation? Strong muscles to burrow into desert soil and live underground during the day, both to conserve energy and to hunt under the cover of darkness. Now, to protect against water loss through the skin, the Titanoboa would take a lesson from the spadefoot toad. This toad secretes a semi-permeable membrane that makes its skin thick, locking in moisture. Our desert Titanoboa would branch out and have a new diet of birds and mammals. Many desert animals are too small to make a meal, so Titanoboa would lie in wait for a herd of camels, slither out of its burrow and make a killing. Or it might go months without food. So the evolutionary path of Titanoboas could lead to two subspecies. The first one is shark-like, swimming far and wide across the ocean, able to preserve its body heat through adaptations that make it warm-blooded. And the second is also warm-blooded, but lives in burrows deep in the desert, like the sandworms from Dune. They emerge from the burrows with lightning speed, only to strike, eat, and then retreat back underground. These 21st century Titanoboas would be as long as 23 meters and about 1.2 meters wide. Imagine going for a swim in the ocean and running into one of those. You'd have just enough time for one last breath. 6,000 years ago to today. Now, this brings us to the question of how modern-day humans might interact with these magnificent and terrifying creatures. Before the start of modern hunting, Titanoboas would have been legendary, frightening sea creatures that terrified humans. Our ancestors would probably be scared of going in the ocean. Who knows? Any swim could be your last if you encountered a Titanoboa. The only good news would have been that these enormous creatures would probably have little interest in eating you. Because humans would provide little sustenance, they'd rather catch a large fish or crocodile. That would be much more satisfying. Now, as humans developed better weapons, the relationship would have changed. There's evidence of humans hunting whales as far back as 6000 BCE. If the Titanoboa was still around, it may have been a target of fishermen thousands of years ago. Maybe these snakes would become part of our diet. If their meat was tasty, who knows? Maybe humans would have hunted them to near extinction by now. In today's world, it'd be a lot like the occasional shark attack. We'd probably hear about rare Titanoboa attacks on humans who swam too far out into the ocean. In the desert, nomadic tribes would probably fear the random, unpredictable attacks of the desert Titanoboa. Camels would have evolved to be super sensitive to those giant snakes' underground movements. Maybe they'd warn humans when they sensed activity underground. With infrared technology, we'd be able to detect the heat signature of Titanoboas in their underground burrows. Future. But in today's fast-changing world, something new and interesting would be happening. Human activity has reversed the cooling trend. With global warming, temperatures are becoming attractive for reptiles again. Our newly evolved Titanoboas have a warm-blooded inner architecture that has helped them survive the cooling of prior epochs, but as the Earth heats again, the Titanoboa would, once again, lean on the environment for heat rather than using its muscular inner activity. Conditions would be ripe for the Titanoboa to hunt even more effectively and grow bigger. As sea levels rise in future years, our coastal cities will be flooded and destroyed. The warm weather will help new generations of Titanoboa thrive. But the traditional habitats of the Titanoboa are currently being destroyed. The lush tropical swamplands and forests near tropical waters are being wiped out by logging and commercial activity. The growing acidification of the waters will kill the marine life that the Titanoboa feeds on. This would prove to be the biggest challenge for the creature, the destruction of its food supply. But there is one prey left for the Titanoboa. It would have to eat several to make a meal of them, but there's lots around. You guessed it, I'm talking about us. Maybe we'd become the target of the new ferocious Titanoboa.
Right, good. Fine by me if Titanoboa doesn't thrive. Snakes are not my cup of tea. Not my thing, really. Kind of freaked out by fast-moving, slithery sticks that can lunge, bite, inject venom into me, or squeeze the breath out of my lungs. That is not fun. I'm also not a fan of spiders, arachnids, or of insects. I've been dealing with a lot of mosquitoes lately, bloodsuckers. They love me for my blood type. I'm the universal donor of blood to mosquitoes. Okay, now imagine a mosquito was bigger. Prehistoric insects were terrifyingly huge. Well, not mosquitoes really. They were about the same size as our current day mosquitoes. But other insects, dragonflies, 2-foot mayflies, pretty much all other insects would make you want to stay inside, lock your doors, and seal off your windows.
300 million years ago, Earth was the kingdom of giant insects. As time went on, they eventually went extinct, and then the dinosaurs entered the scene. But what if that never happened? What if these giant scorpions, worms, and dragonflies were still around today? And how did they go extinct in the first place? This is What If, and here's what would happen if the giant insects never went extinct. Okay, before we get to what our insects would be like today, well, first we need to go back. The Carboniferous period, also known as the Age of Oxygen, ran from 400 million years ago to 290 million years ago. Supersized dragonfly wannabes, also known as griffin flies, had wingspans up to 70 centimeters. They darted about, gobbling up smaller insects. The griffin flies were also 45 centimeters long. They had huge eyes and vision like a hawk. Their spiny legs helped them grab their prey. Then there was the Mosasaurus. It was 55 centimeters long and had 6 wings. It had 2 pairs of regular wings and an additional pair of winglets. But its scariest feature? It had a beak-like mouth equipped with a sucking pump. Like a vampire, it would pierce the tissues of plants and drink their juices. Maybe in the modern day, it would go after you. But we'll answer that later on. There was also the giant millipede, Arthropleura armata, entering the room at 2.5 meters in length. Luckily, this guy is strictly vegan. He dined on fruits, leaves, and seeds. And watch out for these massive scorpions as big as tennis rackets. You do not want to be on the wrong end of that stinger. But hold on, what made these insects grow so big in the first place? The answer lies in the weather the Earth was having at the time. At the beginning of this period, around 350 million years ago, it was warm. And as warm weather does, it encouraged the plants to grow. Around this time, oxygen levels in the atmosphere were about 20%, similar to what we have now on Earth. Fast forward 50 million years later, massive forests have taken over and swamps cover low-lying areas. Oxygen levels, well, they've skyrocketed to 35%. Now, the high levels of oxygen in the atmosphere made the insects big. But how exactly? Well, first you gotta look at how insects breathe. Insects don't have lungs like we do. They have a set of openings on their bodies called spiracles. These spiracle openings lead to a set of tubes called trachea, which run through the insects' bodies. Air enters the spiracles and passes through the trachea to deliver oxygen to all the cells in the insect's body. The more oxygen in the air, the more that can pass into the insect's body.
Now, there was 35% oxygen in the air at that time, and this allowed insects to take in more oxygen, which allowed them to grow bigger. But then, 150 million years ago, something changed. Oxygen levels went up, but insect size went down. Why? Because a ruthless killer of insects arrived on the scene. Birds, which are, as you know, flying dinosaurs. These birds feasted on insects. They looked at the giant griffin flies and salivated, and the bigger the insect, the more likely it was to get eaten by a bird. So, insect evolutionary survival strategy was to get small and nimble. Large insects went extinct and the smaller ones survived. Okay, so now that we know what happened to the giant insects, was there a way they could have avoided extinction? Well, the easiest way would be for the oxygen levels to go back up to 35%. Okay, the insects would get larger, but large insects would still be hunted by birds, which are in most cases stronger. So our insects need some better survival strategies. Let's look at the largest insects we have today, one of them being the weta. It's 10 centimeters long and has been around since even before the dinosaurs. So how has it survived? By getting an island of its own. In the weta's case, New Zealand. It lived here for millions of years without having to worry about any predators. But as a long-term survival strategy, it hasn't exactly worked out. Predators eventually came to New Zealand, and wetas now live in the Auckland Zoo. Okay, we need a better option for our giant insects. How about a supercharged stealth reproduction strategy, like the cicadas? After mating, the female cicada lays nearly 400 eggs. These eggs hatch in about 6 to 8 weeks, and the young nymphs drop down, burrow into the ground, and don't come out for up to 17 years. That's definitely one way to do it. As an insect, if you make yourself scarce, no one can eat you. Maybe our giant prehistoric insects could try that. But where's the fun in spending most of your life underground? So there's one more option. We call it the chemical warfare strategy, and it's used by the lubber. Yeah, the lubber, a large grasshopper about 8 centimeters long. Now, that's much smaller than our Carboniferous ancestors, but it has some great survival strategies that we can use. Lubbers are great at picking up various poisons from plants like onions or garlic, and they then make a poisonous broth that they can use against predators. Think of it as nature's pepper spray. When they meet a predator, like a bird or a rat, they eject their poisonous broth, creating a chemical cloud. Predators then gag and spit out the lubbers. And if this fails, they've got an internal toxin lined up. An unsuspecting bird that eats a lubber will vomit, and then they'll never try to eat one again. Okay, so now let's see if giving these insects some survival tactics will work to stop them from going extinct. With the world at 35% oxygen and some internal toxins, yeah, the giant insects now fight off the birds. But what happens when the Chicxulub asteroid hits? That's the one that wiped out the dinosaurs. Well, it's actually a pretty good thing for our insects because the biggest predators are gone and there's plenty of swampy, dying material for our insects to feast on. But what would happen to mammal and human evolution? Would we even be around? Because today, if our air became 35% oxygen overnight, that would be toxic for us. It'd cause coughing, difficulty breathing, and in severe cases, seizures and death. But then again, if apes and then humans evolved in 35% oxygen, then our bodies would have evolved to function in that environment. Our cells would be supercharged, producing even more energy with higher oxygen. We'd be super runners and super swimmers, breaking all of today's records. And our brains, which use 20% of the oxygen we breathe, would have evolved to grow even bigger and faster. Okay, so now it's time to return to the modern day. What does the world look like? Well, if you looked out your window during the summer, instead of just seeing different birds, you'd see giant griffin flies and 6-winged insects buzzing around. Would these giant arthropods attack you if you went outside? Well, during some period of evolution, there'd likely be a bunch of large winged insects that attacked humans, especially those pesky griffin flies. But Remember, we humans are no pushovers. During different time periods, we'd have likely developed weapons to fight against these giant insects. During the Stone Age, maybe it was a sharp rock. Today, we'd probably have special bug sprays or zappers to fight them back. Sooner or later, just like the birds would have evolved to leave the giant insects alone, the giant insects would steer clear of us humans. Now, in addition to giant bugs flying around outside, we might have giant cockroaches and giant spiders as well. If these insects developed chemical defenses against predators, well, that could enable them to stay giant. But without these defenses, they'd be better off being small and nimble. So maybe mosquitoes would stay small. Ugh, with giant cockroaches, you'd need a whole new level of pest control to keep your kitchen safe. Now, if bugs were giant, would humans have evolved to be a whole lot bigger too? It's possible we'd be bigger. There's evidence to show that oxygen levels were rising from 15% to 19% when the dinosaurs first appeared, so there could be a link, but only if it gave us an evolutionary advantage. Now, talking about things getting bigger, one other danger would get bigger too. Fires. Everything would be highly combustible. The smallest spark would get a blaze going, and some of these fires might even be caused by giant insects. Take the bombardier beetle. When it's threatened, it mixes two chemicals from inside its abdomen to create an explosion. Well, a giant-sized bombardier beetle might set off a much bigger explosion, one that could start a forest fire. And in 35% oxygen, forests would burn frequently. In fact, plants would probably evolve to be more resistant to fires, or they would have strategies to grow back quicker after getting burnt. And you'd also notice that the world would be getting a lot louder. A mass of cicadas today are about as loud as a lawnmower, around 100 decibels. But giant cicadas? They'd probably make you go deaf. And you know what else is likely to happen? We'll probably have insects on the menu. We humans like to eat everything, so we'll definitely be looking to add these as a protein source. Once they're bigger, they're probably perfect for a meal. You'll have Meatless Monday and probably have Giant Insect Friday. Down under, they'll probably be throwing griffin flies on the barbie.
Over 300 million years ago, before the age of giant dinosaurs, Earth was covered with giant insects. Imagine a world where dragonflies are the size of crows and millipedes are as long as cars. Welcome to the Carboniferous period. Why were insects so enormous during this time? What did oxygen have to do with it? And why did these insects go extinct? This is What If, and here's what the Earth looked like in the age of giant insects. The Carboniferous period was one of the most transformational periods in the history of Earth. The planet's land masses were beginning to form the supercontinent of Pangaea. Extensive swamps and warm, humid forests dominated the landscape. And giant insects weren't the only huge creatures roaming the planet. There was also a vast array of marine life, like early forms of sharks and a giant amphibian that would reach up to 6 feet long. Now, enough talking. Let's travel back in time, 300 million years ago, and dive into the Carboniferous Age. Now, the first thing you'd probably notice would be the giant insect-like creatures. One of the most iconic was the Meganeura. This insect resembled a modern-day dragonfly, except with a major twist. It had a wingspan of up to 75 centimeters. Yeah, scarier than that though, it was carnivorous, hunting down other insects and small amphibians. Hopefully it doesn't come for you. So that thing is in the sky, but on land, you'll have the Arthropleura. This millipede-like creature could grow up to 2.5 meters long. Luckily, it wouldn't go after you. It preferred munching on decomposing vegetation. Hey, before we talk more about these giant insects, there's another giant issue we need to worry about, and that's our planet's ecosystems and how important it is to help them.
Stick around till the end of this video to check out an inspiring project from the folks over at Planet Wild. Another creepy-looking insect was the Pulmonoscorpius. This was a giant scorpion that mostly roamed the swampier areas of Earth. They could grow 70 centimeters long. There were also giant cockroaches that grew to 10 centimeters, and mayflies with 45-centimeter wingspans. So it's safe to say that you'd have a lot to watch out for when you're wandering around in this period, but the question is, how did these insects get so big anyway? Well, you may have noticed as you've been hanging around in the Carboniferous age, you feel a lot more energetic and alert. Maybe you've had an easier time running around. This has to do with the oxygen levels in your current world. Research has estimated that the atmospheric oxygen levels were as high as 35% during this period. Compare that to the 21% we breathe today. Oxygen was one of the key factors in the gigantism found in insects at the time. But why would this make them so giant? Insects breathe differently from other creatures. Insects don't have a circulatory system to transport oxygen. Instead, it gets delivered directly to their tissues through a network of tiny tubes called the trachea. And the more oxygen in the atmosphere, the bigger these insects are. But there might be more reasons why the insects grew to this size. Another theory suggests that the insects were forced to grow so large due to oxygen toxicity. Yeah, as amazing as oxygen is, you can have too much of a good thing. Too much oxygen in your body can create what's known as free radicals. These are unstable molecules that can damage your cells and even damage your DNA. In the case of our insects, they were forced to grow this big. Otherwise, they'd suffer oxygen toxicity. Growing larger would slow down the rate of oxygen absorption, making it harder to suffer from too much oxygen. And the same could happen to you. The longer you hang out in this period, the higher oxygen levels will cause you to experience nausea, respiratory issues, and even some effects on your nervous system. Now, insects were arguably the stars of this age, but they weren't the only things to experience massive change during the Carboniferous period. This time was known as the Coal Age. That's because of the extensive coal beds that formed after ancient forests decayed. These coal beds are one of our main sources of energy. We're still using them today. And a lot of the fruits and veggies you find in the grocery store may be descendants of plants from over 300 million years ago. The Carboniferous period saw the evolution of the first seed-bearing plants, creating more diverse ecosystems than we'd ever seen before. Wait, what's that over there? Kinda looks like a dinosaur. Oh, hey little guy. Turns out this wasn't a dino, just one of the first reptiles to ever appear. But if you stick around a couple of million more years, we'll enter the Mesozoic era, which was known as the Age of Dinosaurs. Speaking of change, the atmosphere was another part of Earth that evolved during this period. Earth had a lush, greenhouse-like climate when you first arrived, warm and humid temperatures to support the swampy forests we've been mucking about. But as the period progressed over millions of years, the climate transitioned to what's known as an icehouse Earth state. The temperature would get significantly lower and ice sheets would begin to form, mainly in the southern hemisphere. But why did this happen? Well, as we've been exploring this crazy period, Earth's land masses have been slowly coming together to form a supercontinent known as Pangaea. And when land masses this big start to move, it can seriously affect ocean currents, wind patterns, and global climate. Now, the rainforests have collapsed, which has led to a decline in the fauna and vegetation that were previously booming. And with the rainforests in decline, well, that means oxygen levels are being reduced. Before you know it, our massive insects start dying and going extinct. Without the higher levels of oxygen available to support their size, well, these giant insects can't survive. The lower oxygen levels and a drier climate have created a habitat better suited for smaller insects. Also happening at this point, early reptiles are starting to take over, making the landscape way more difficult for the insects. Millions of years ago, Earth looked very different. All the continents were fused into one, teeming with life, both beautiful and terrifying. When you think of prehistoric times, you might picture a T-Rex rampaging through the jungle with its razor-sharp teeth. But even before the dinosaurs, there were other giant creatures ruling the Earth. Yeah, welcome to the Permian period. This epic started 300 million years ago. Back then, our planet had one supercontinent, Pangaea, surrounded by a world ocean called Panthalassa. The Permian period began at the end of an ice age when temperatures were much cooler than today. Then, during early Permian days, Earth warmed to a lush environment with a diversity of plants and a rapid evolution of insect and animal life. Only, as you probably know, everything is ever-changing on our blue marble. Over the next 50 million years, Earth kept growing hotter and drier. Eventually, the most deadly event in the history of our planet wiped out nearly everything that ever lived here. Scientists call this event the Great Dying, and it was the most catastrophic mass extinction event the Earth has ever seen. And the Earth has seen 5 of them. But before we get to all this doom and gloom, let me take you on an epic journey back in time. Here in the Permian period, some of the most incredible species that roamed our young planet are about to emerge. If you could time travel nearly 300 million years into the past, you'd land smack dab in the middle of the supercontinent Pangaea. Earth's smaller continents would have just finished colliding with each other to form this enormous landmass, taking up 1/3 of the planet's surface. There was likely less oxygen in the air than there is now, but you still might be able to breathe. Oh, and bring a jacket because it would likely be chilly, with some areas averaging no more than a brisk 4 degrees Celsius. But don't worry, things will soon start heating up. By the end of the early Permian, the Ice Age was on its way out and Pangaea was becoming a lush world. Plants and animals started to thrive. This was a volcanic world. Violent eruptions changed the climate, shaped the landscape, and paved the way for evolution. When giant swamp forests began drying out, plant life had to adapt, and so, 290 million years ago, Earth saw the very first seed-bearing plants called gymnosperms. These plants carried seeds on their cones, and they spread across the supercontinent like wildfire. The ancient evergreen forest of the early Permian was hiding something familiar. Just like today, you could find cicadas and beetles piercing and sucking on the plants, and the cutest of them all? Cockroaches. Only, these weren't the cockroaches you know today. These prehistoric vermin were gigantic, the size of birds. But despite their size, cockroaches never ruled prehistoric land, and that's good news, am I right? No, something much more fascinating was roaming Pangaea. The now extinct ancestor of primitive mammals, Dimetrodon. This animal was as fascinating as it was terrifying. Encountering a Dimetrodon would be quite a sight to behold. This ancient lizard grew to 5 meters long and weighed 225 kilograms. It had a large sail running down its spine. Scientists think this sail helped the reptile regulate its body temperature. soaking up warmth during the daytime and dissipating excess heat during the cooler nights. It would walk toward you like a crocodile and act like a total menace. Dimetrodon was an apex predator of its time. Watch out for a mix of sharp and flat teeth that would slice you open and grind you up. In the Middle Permian period, other mammal-like reptiles took over the planet. Therapsids. They had strong jaws with sharp teeth and a somewhat upright stance thanks to their legs being situated underneath their bodies. Therapsid reptiles varied from the 5-meter-long, likely omnivorous Deuterosaurus to the 5 times smaller, meat-eating Lycanops. You could meet plenty more therapsids if you stuck around for another 20 million years. During the Middle Permian period, Earth kept getting hotter. The average global temperature on Pangaea grew to about 25 degrees Celsius. And volcanoes were spitting greenhouse gases out into the atmosphere. Due to the changing climate, sea levels were shifting, but marine life found ways to thrive. If you were to take a dip in the prehistoric superocean, you'd be swimming alongside ancient sharks and bony primitive fish. Many more complex marine species came and went as the environment kept changing. In the late Permian period, you could have a friendly encounter with another reptile, Lystrosaurus. These looked like a cross between a lizard and a pig, but unlike all the scary prehistoric monsters out there, Lystrosaurus was a herbivore. It was just 1 meter long and had powerful front legs for burrowing. Soon, another cute mammal-like lizard evolved, the Cynodont. The Cynodont looked like a giant rodent. It was about 1 meter long, had whiskers, and fed on small animals and insects. Now, during this time, something bad was brewing in the air. A large amount of volcanic activity was displacing oxygen from the atmosphere. Scientists think there was as little as 10% oxygen in the air. Compare that to 21% today. You'd have a hard time breathing in that environment. And the temperature kept rising and rising. With an average temperature of about 28 degrees Celsius, this lush prehistoric world was turning into an oven. All good things must come to an end, and sadly, this period came to a particularly brutal one. About 252 million years ago, about 90% of all plant and animal life was wiped out. This tragic moment is called the Great Dying, and it was Earth's most devastating mass extinction event. Scientists still debate what caused this catastrophic extinction. Most theories suggest it was the result of explosive volcanic activity. As huge volcanic eruptions swept the continent, massive amounts of ash were unleashed into the atmosphere. So much ash that it blocked out most, if not all, of the incoming sunlight. And with no sunlight, global temperatures dropped suddenly. Plants couldn't perform their photosynthetic processes and died off. And without plants, the very basis of their food chain, animals soon followed. Things got worse before they got better. Because of all the carbon dioxide emitted during the volcanic eruptions, global temperatures rose again. And not just to where they were, but higher, much higher. And this caused the superocean to lose most of its oxygen. And unable to breathe, a majority of the Permian sea animals perished. Eventually, over 95% of marine species and more than 70% of land animals became extinct. This mass extinction event could make you sad enough to want to bring back all the animals that have ever gone away. Dinosaurs, too.
Okay, forget the meteorite. The real extinction level event is you not having any of this cool what if merch. You know, you must be a paleontologist because you just uncovered a total legend.
Seriously though, we got what you need to show off your love for all things what if, right here in our merch store. We got t-shirts and hoodies to camouflage you from carnivorous dinosaurs, hats and mugs for sipping coffee while you ponder how you're going to outrun a velociraptor, and the What If book, because let's be real, you've probably wondered what would happen if dinosaurs had invented smartphones. Ready to find some gear that's truly timeless? Well, dig into our collection at shop.underknown.com and unearth a whole host of merch from What If and all our other hit shows. All right, back to our regularly scheduled programming before another dinosaur extincting asteroid hits. If you traveled 250 million years into the past, you'd be witnessing the dawn of dinosaurs. One of the leading theories is that dinosaurs evolved from a species known as archosaurs. These were the dominant reptiles that appeared during the late Permian period. To some, they may even look like dinosaurs, and that's because they were ancestors to these incredible creatures. Over time, the archosaurs split up into two groups. One of these groups led to crocodiles, and the other led to dinosaurs, which continued evolving into thousands of different species. One of the main traits they eventually gained was their bipedal abilities. Early dinosaurs began to walk on two legs, freeing their front limbs for other uses like grabbing food and defending themselves. And that's just the start of their evolutionary journey. Let's travel back in time, 250 million years ago, and witness the history of dinosaurs in 10 minutes. Triassic period. As you enter this new era, you'll notice that the dinosaurs running around look pretty different from what you're used to seeing. One of the earliest dinosaurs that emerged from the archosaurs was the Eoraptor. This little guy was about the size of a dog, barely 1 meter tall and weighing in at a meager 10 kilograms. You know, we typically think of dinosaurs as these massive creatures, but it'd be a couple million more years before that started to happen. We'll check in to see how those dinos are growing in size as we travel through time. But for now, let's see what's happening to Earth. During the Triassic period, the supercontinent Pangaea starts to fragment, slowly altering global climates and ecosystems. The climate was generally hot and dry, and there were no polar ice caps, creating a stark contrast to what you're typically used to in modern-day Earth. The vegetation was also very different and was crucial for the survival and evolution of dinosaurs. The plants have different characteristics as well. Some are tough, some nutritious, and others potentially poisonous. Each one of them will influence the dietary and adaptive strategies of different dinosaur species. Speaking of which, what are some other dinosaurs doing during this time? Weighing in at about 23 kilograms and 1 meter tall, we have the Coelophysis. It was a little bit bigger than the Eoraptor, but that didn't stop it from being a fast and agile predator that likely preyed on smaller animals. Now, the Herrerasaurus was slightly taller at about 1.1 meters, but was a lot heavier at about 350 kilograms. Then we have the Plateosaurus. Now this guy is way bigger than me. It stood tall at about 3 meters and weighed up to 4,000 kilograms. This was one of the earliest examples of how big dinosaurs could grow. But wait, they get even bigger than this. Despite their impressive forms, dinosaurs weren't the dominant creatures during the Triassic. They had to share their environments with many other organisms, all vying for survival in the diverse ecosystems. This was the case until the Triassic period would experience a great extinction event. This was likely caused by massive volcanic activity, climate change, and potentially even some small asteroid impacts. This will have a significant effect on life on Earth and lead to the extinction of numerous species. But it wasn't all bad, especially for our dinosaurs. This moment set the stage to bring new opportunities to these species, leading to them dominating the Earth. Jurassic period. Now, instead of dinosaurs simply surviving, this is where they thrive. Over the millions of years, different species have been evolving, and dinosaurs are now the rulers of the Earth. They spread across continents, dominating the lush forests and arid deserts. Occupying these areas were some massive dinosaurs, ones that you're probably a lot more familiar with. We have the Stegosaurus, Brachiosaurus, and Allosaurus. These were some of the largest creatures ever to walk the earth. But you'd quickly notice that it wasn't just these massive beasts that were roaming around. This era also saw the evolution of theropods. These were smaller dinosaurs that had more of a bird-like form. One of the most famous was the Archaeopteryx. It was kind of like a mix between a dinosaur and a bird, with feathers and wings, but also with bony teeth and a tail. The Archaeopteryx was a crucial link between birds and dinosaurs. If you wait about 100 million more years, they'll evolve into the birds we know today. Oh, wait, is that a spoiler? After 56 million years, the Jurassic period comes to an end. This was after yet another extinction event happened. Luckily, this one is more minor. However, due to climate change, volcanic activity, and sea levels changing, some species are going extinct. This, once again, changes the landscape as the dinosaurs enter their final era. Cretaceous period. Okay, we've now entered the Cretaceous period, and as we've been traveling through these millions of years, you may have noticed something's missing. Right, one of the dinosaurs' biggest stars hasn't appeared yet. Say hello to the Tyrannosaurus rex. The T-Rex was a massive beast. It was 3.7 meters tall and 12 meters long. Not only that, but it was a whopping 9 tons. Equipped with a powerful jaw and incredibly sharp teeth, the T-Rex dominated the Cretaceous kingdom. It was one of the most dominant predators history has ever seen. This colossal beast wasn't just scavenging leftovers, it was an active hunter, stalking its prey with keen eyesight and a heightened sense of smell. Among its favorite meals were the sizable herbivores like the Edmontosaurus. But the T-Rex didn't stop there. It would take on formidable opponents like the Triceratops and even other smaller theropods if the opportunity arose. With its powerful jaws filled with 12-inch teeth and its strong hind limbs that allowed it to run at speeds of up to 40 kilometers per hour, the T-Rex was a master of the hunt. But this period wasn't just filled with massive beasts like the T-Rex. Look around and you'll also notice even more feathered dinosaurs in the Cretaceous period. One of them being the Velociraptor. Now, you typically see them portrayed like this with no feathers, but evidence suggests that these creatures were quite feathered. Now, the feathers weren't necessarily used for flying, more for warmth and stability. And this one is the Microraptor. Now, unlike the Velociraptor, its feathers likely were used for flight, giving us crucial insight into the evolution of birds. Okay, as I mentioned earlier, Pangaea was breaking up and forming into the continents we know today. But because of this, some dinosaurs were forced to migrate and separate into different areas of the world. These dinosaurs had to adapt to their new environments, potentially changing the course of their evolution. But none of this matters when we consider what happens next. The cataclysmic event. Okay, as you've been hanging out with the dinosaurs for millions of years, an asteroid has been making its way toward Earth. Then suddenly, it hits, creating a massive crater 150 kilometers wide and 20 kilometers deep. Naturally, something this huge makes a devastating impact on the world, one that'll change it forever. The asteroid's collision is massive, but its impact is felt long after the initial crash. Due to the massive collision, the environment drastically changes. Significant drops in temperature start to occur, and debris from the crash begins to block out the sun. This impacts not only the dinosaurs' health, but also their food supply. This devastating event wipes out 75% of the Earth's species, many of which are the dinosaurs we've been observing this whole time. But don't worry, not all of the dinosaurs went extinct. The aviation-based dinosaurs we checked out earlier managed to survive the asteroid strike, eventually evolving into birds. Aftermath. Now that most of the dinosaurs are extinct, it's cleared the way for mammals to diversify and expand their impact on the world. With less competition, early mammals can now thrive and take over, which slowly, over time, allowed humans to evolve, building the world we know today. What was life like in the Cenozoic era? Welcome to one of the most formative and terrifying time periods ever, the Cenozoic era. You'll find giant creatures like woolly mammoths and megalodons roaming the seas, along with some other creatures you might be a little bit more familiar with, but more on that later. Let's strap in and travel back in time to the Cenozoic era. How would you survive during this period? Why was Earth so dangerous? And how is this era similar to modern day? This is What If, and here's what would happen if you traveled to the Cenozoic era. Okay, you're now 66 million years in the past. You just missed the age of dinosaurs by a couple of million years. They were wiped out by a giant asteroid and are now extinct. But that doesn't mean that other life hasn't found a way. The death of the dinos made way for new creatures to emerge. Mammals. Yeah, the early Cenozoic period saw the rise of primitive mammals that would begin to diversify into different evolutionary niches. Let's explore and check them out. One of the most famous mammals during this time was the megafauna. These were giant creatures that roamed the earth. A lot of these probably look familiar. Go to the colder regions of the earth and you'll find packs of woolly mammoths roaming about. These guys were nearly 3.5 meters tall and weighed up to 8 tons. Okay, go over to what's now known as Australia and you'll see the Diprotodon. This is the biggest marsupial that ever lived and looks like a giant wombat. And it wasn't just the mammals that were giant. Watch out in the water because you'll be met with one of the most terrifying creatures ever, the Megalodon. This giant shark dominated the oceans with teeth as big as 18 centimeters and a body as long as 20 meters. I could go on, but we have so much more to explore. Let's check out a couple of other creatures and then I'm going to show you something really cool. The Cenozoic era also had the Glyptodon, which was like a giant armadillo, the Megatherium, a giant sloth and one of the largest of the mammals, and the Elasmotherium, also known as the Siberian unicorn. It was basically a woolly version of a rhinoceros. And there were a bunch more creatures. But why were they all so big? Well, researchers have several different theories as to why these creatures became so massive. One of the leading ones is that with the dinosaurs gone, these mammals could thrive in open habitats, helping them grow larger and larger as generations progressed. But there's another incredibly important mammal I haven't mentioned yet, and although it's not a giant, it is one of the most important. And that's you. Well, sort of. Humans' early ancestors were primates. With the death of the dinosaurs, the rise of primates became possible, allowing them to evolve. Early primates were small and weak creatures when the Cenozoic era started, but they had two key features to help them become dominant: grasping fingers and forward-facing eyes. Over millions of years, they survived and later thrived on Earth. This led to primates diversifying and the emergence of different species, which then gave us two main groups: the primates, who would later evolve into monkeys and apes, and the hominids, who would later evolve into humans. But this wouldn't happen for millions of years. As the Cenozoic era progressed, hominids learned how to use tools, control fire, and develop the beginnings of early language. As more and more hominids appeared, they spread globally and could be found in Asia, Europe, Africa, and North America. Some of these species died out, specifically the Neanderthal. They evolved outside of Africa and adapted to live life in Eurasia, but as modern humans progressed, they were more technologically advanced, eventually leading to the extinction of the Neanderthal. As more and more species of hominids evolved, more and more died out. The only ones to survive were the Homo sapiens, who stayed in Africa. Their brains continued to grow, leading to more advanced language, technology, culture, and eventually you. Speaking of you, how would you survive in this era? Well, to do that, it'd be helpful to know what the Cenozoic era was made up of. After all, it spanned tens of millions of years and a lot of stuff happened. The Cenozoic era is divided into 3 time periods: the Paleogene, Neogene, and the Quaternary period. Let's quickly break them down. Paleogene period. This marked the start of the Cenozoic era. The mammals we've been talking about, along with flowering plants, have begun to emerge. Oh, and watch out for some creepy-looking insects. Earth's tectonic plates continued to shape continents, as they have been for many millions of years. South America and Africa would continue to move apart, and the Himalayas would begin to form. You'd notice a generally warm and comfortable climate, but that would start to change as you move into the next era. Neogene period. Okay, the hominids we've been talking about have now appeared, and more modern plants and animals have begun to evolve. One of the main things you'll notice is how much colder it's getting. Ice ages are becoming more common during this period. Quaternary period. This period had multiple ice ages and interglacial moments. The Earth cooled down and heated up several times. Humans, along with the large mammals we mentioned earlier, had more impact than ever before. This period is also known as the Anthropocene, which recognizes the significant impact humans had on the Earth's ecosystem and geology. So, how would you survive during these times? Well, it would be much easier than if you were to live in a time period even further away. Hundreds of millions of years ago, Earth had more oxygen, which would make breathing more difficult. But luckily, you don't need to worry about that. You just have to be wary of the giant animals trying to kill you, the unpredictable weather, and the weird kinds of foods that could make you sick. Sounds easy, right? Hopefully, you'll be able to cozy up with some early hominids and join their tribe. They'll have access to shelter, fire, and tools. And if you can't manage to do that, well, find a cave, make a fire, and hope for the best. But wait, you're technically surviving in the Cenozoic era right now. Yeah, that's right. This era hasn't ended yet. We're currently living in the Quaternary period. Eras on Earth are typically marked by major geological shifts or mass extinctions, neither of which we've had to deal with, luckily. Welcome to the Permian period, an ancient time full of life, but also death. The Permian was home to the largest mass extinction event in Earth's history, even bigger than what wiped out the dinosaurs. Nearly all life was brought to an end. But how did this extinction event come about in the first place? And what kind of life did end up surviving? This is What If, and here's what would happen if you lived in the Permian period. The Permian period lasted almost 50 million years, from 299 to 252 million years ago. You can divide it into 3 parts: early, middle, and late. And we're going to walk you through all 3 of them. Let's start, obviously, in the early Permian. This period saw the birth of some of the earliest 4-legged creatures. They're all extinct now, but they were the forefathers to dinosaurs and later mammals. They were massive predators that you definitely want to stay away from. On land, the apex predators were the synapsid. This species ruled the land before dinosaurs took their place. They're often referred to as mammal-like reptiles, and they look like a mix between a dog and a lizard. They also had incredibly thick skin, which retained a lot of moisture. This allowed them to thrive in the increasingly dry environment. The most famous synapsid, and one you would definitely not want to encounter, is the Dimetrodon. Over 3.5 meters long, this carnivorous predator had a large sail on its back. Since it was cold-blooded, it needed something to regulate its temperature. Maybe this sail-like appendage did the job. It helped the Dimetrodon heat up and cool down depending on the temperature. These beasts were also equipped with an incredibly scary mouthful of teeth that were all different sizes. Another animal you'll have to worry about? Gorgonopsians. These were carnivores with saber-toothed fangs. They remind me a lot of Siberian tigers. Some scientists have described them as the T-Rex of their time. They were frightening predators that could destroy anything in their path. And their favorite food? Dicynodonts. That name literally means 2 dog teeth. Thankfully, if you encountered one, you wouldn't need to be afraid because they might become your lunch. Yeah, these synapsids were herbivores, and they came in all different sizes. They could be small, like a pet dog, or as big as a cow. Dicynodonts looked like the love child of mammals, reptiles, and birds. They had the skull of a turtle, the beak of a bird, and even tusks to dig food out of the ground. Dicynodonts in the Permian era were cold-blooded, but during the Triassic period that followed, varieties evolved to become more like mammals, with features that helped keep them warm. Now, amazingly, these creatures survived the catastrophe that we'll get to later on, which is a good thing because otherwise humans wouldn't have evolved. We'll get back to what creatures you'd come across in the Permian in a bit, but for now, let's talk about where they lived. Okay, during this period, if you looked down on Earth from high up in space, you'd see that the land was made up of just one supercontinent. It was called Pangaea. It was formed by the collision of 2 large continents, Gondwana and Euramerica. The formation of this single large landmass had a massive impact on the climate. But before we get to that, let's look at how today's continents mapped into this supercontinent. Pangaea looked a bit like a giant crescent. The top curve of the crescent would later break apart to form Europe and Asia. The main body of the crescent contained North America, South America, and Africa. And the bottom, well, it would later separate to form India, Antarctica, and Australia. The crescent curved to contain what was called the Tethys Ocean. And the rest of Earth, well, it was all one giant body of water called the Panthalassic Ocean. Okay, so far so good. Yeah, you don't have the choice of 7 continents to live on, but you could set up camp anywhere on Pangaea. Maybe you'd enjoy a spot on the beach. But here's the important question. Are you gonna freeze to death? Or would you just bake? Well, this would depend on when you get there and where you land. At the beginning of the Permian, Earth was actually in an ice age. Hope you packed a parka. If you set foot on the southern region of Pangaea, you'd find tons of glaciers, or literally gigatons of glaciers. These could be found in what is now southern India, Australia, and Antarctica. Now, due to this giant landmass, the weather will be vastly different from what you're used to today. In our current world, the oceans do an amazing job at absorbing heat. They also warm up and cool down slowly, affecting the temperatures on land. But on this supercontinent, the interior land was far from water, so temperatures in this area are much more extreme. In the middle Permian, you'd enjoy a climate that's warmer, milder, and moist. The glaciers have now receded. Inland, Pangaea is arid, and according to the Pangaean mega monsoon theory, there were extreme seasonal fluctuations. You'd be hit with wet and dry periods throughout the year. With further increases in temperature, the late Permian would be very dry, with some alternating warm and cool periods. Now, what about the atmosphere? Was there enough oxygen for you to survive? Well, at the beginning of the Permian, oxygen concentration was actually pretty high, 30%. This is because of what had happened on Earth during the previous Carboniferous period. Forests had covered the Earth, creating an oxygen-rich atmosphere. Now, you might enjoy this extra boost of oxygen. You'd feel more energized and lively. Living in the mountains would be much more comfortable because the thinner air would now be offset by the higher oxygen concentration. But as good as oxygen is, you can't breathe it for too long at this concentration. Over time, you'd overdose and get oxygen toxicity. You could have difficulty breathing, and in severe cases, you might have a seizure and die. But high oxygen levels didn't last the whole time. There was a big drop toward the end. But before we get to that, you're probably wondering, what is there around here to eat? Well, as temperatures rose during the Permian, plant life began to take off. But unfortunately, there wouldn't be many options for you on the menu. In the early Permian, there were polar tundra regions as well as tropical swamp forests. Now, as the climate became more dry, the swamp forests dried out and water-loving plants shrank to become shrubs. So, unless you had the jaws and stomach of a cow or 4 stomachs of a cow, eating these dry shrubs wouldn't have been too much fun to chomp on. And unfortunately, these shrubs were all shrub, no berry. There were no fruits at this time. They didn't really evolve till the Jurassic, so you'd probably be at risk of getting scurvy. But there was plenty of one thing: ferns. Ferns were the dominant plant life. Maybe you could eat some tender fern leaves and make some tea out of tree bark. It's no whopper value meal, but it'll do, I guess. Some of these plants would have been dangerous too. You wouldn't be accustomed to them, and they might cause some sort of deadly allergic reaction. But nasty plants weren't your only option for food. Why don't you try a nasty insect instead? The increased growth of plant life during this time provided a haven for insects. Bugs with sucking mouth parts made their debut during the Permian. You'd also see massive dragonflies roaming about. Maybe try to catch one of those. I wonder if they taste like chicken. You'd also notice that these insects are massive. In the early Permian, the large insects from the previous Carboniferous era were still around. By the middle Permian, these giant insects had disappeared. What was left were smaller insects that are still around today in some form. But forget these gross plants and insects. Where are the animals we could eat? Well, you wouldn't want to target the scary Dimetrodon or the Gorgonopsian that we met earlier. Some grilled herbivorous Dicynodont would be nice. It's no Popeye's Spicy Chicken Deluxe, but it just might hit the spot. Now, on the smaller side of creatures, there were the Varanopids. These were small lizard-like creatures that mainly dined on insects. Another super important group during the Permian was the Sauropsids. These were basically reptiles. During the Permian period, when synapsids dominated, the Sauropsids remained small and lizard-like, but they'd make a fiery comeback later on. I don't know about you, but these animals are either looking scary or unappetizing, and I'm not really in the mood to eat a cross between a lizard and a dog. Can you catch some fish? Maybe a fillet of fish? Permian seas were full of bony fish, which had 2 features: fan-shaped fins and thick scales. There were also creatures with coiled spiral shells called ammonoids that lived in the water. Again, it's no ultimate endless shrimp, but a seafood diet might be your best bet. Now, if you go for a dip, watch out. You'll want to steer clear of the scary Gyaesia geniae, a salamander-like creature with deadly fangs and a 2-foot-long skull. This creature was way bigger than you. It was 2.5 meters long. Scientists describe its head as being like a toilet seat, which opened up to suck in its prey. The good news? It was sluggish, so if you're a fast swimmer, maybe you can escape it. But not everything thrived during this time. As you reach the late Permian, you'll notice things changing. Creatures all around the planet are going extinct in what's known as the Great Dying.
This was Earth's biggest mass extinction event. 90% of marine life and 70% of all animal and plant life died out. Now, scientists still aren't completely sure what caused this mass extinction, but there are several theories. One of the leading theories is that a series of natural disasters is what got the whole thing going. Volcanoes. Toward the end of the Permian period, there were massive volcanic eruptions in what's now Siberia. And not just for a few years or decades, for about 600,000 years. Huge flows of lava flooded the region, but it wasn't the lava that caused the extinction. It was the volcanic gases that were being spewed into the air. This caused an increased concentration of sulfur dioxide in Earth's atmosphere. What happened next? Acid rain. Volcanic ash was also thrown up in the sky, blocking the sun, making it dark out, also causing the temperature to fall. As a result, plants found it harder to photosynthesize and the food chain was disrupted. The extinction of plant life, then herbivores, and then carnivores followed. It was like a set of dominoes falling. But it wasn't just the food chain. It was literally becoming harder to breathe because the impact to plants also had major effects on the atmosphere. With the disruption to photosynthesis, carbon dioxide increased while oxygen levels plummeted to 16%. Animals that had evolved in a more oxygen-rich atmosphere weren't ready for this drop in oxygen and then died off. If you were there, it would be like trying to breathe at the top of a giant mountain today. Now, as this was happening, animals living at higher altitudes suddenly found the oxygen too thin for their requirements, so they probably moved to lower altitudes and had to compete with other species. Some scientists believe that this is what drove land-based extinctions. Oxygen levels were so low that animals had to remain where the air was most dense, at sea level. Even the slightest climb to a higher altitude would have them gasping for breath. And the rising carbon dioxide also created a greenhouse effect, causing temperatures to rise. This made the oceans warmer as well, which killed a ton of marine life. The rising temperature plus the reduced oxygen equaled a horrible world for all life on Earth, making it nearly impossible to survive. But there's a third theory. Initially, scientists estimated that the Great Dying took place over millions of years, but more recent archaeological evidence indicates that it happened much faster, maybe between 8,000 and 100,000 years. Could something else have happened that caused an abrupt end to these creatures? Yeah, some scientists think there's another culprit, an asteroid. In addition to all these erupting volcanoes, scientists have also found evidence of an asteroid collision. This asteroid may have been 6 to 12 kilometers wide. That's bigger than Mount Everest. So maybe it's a mix of all of them. The volcanic eruptions, the atmospheric effects, and then wham, a massive asteroid as the final nail in the coffin. You combine all three of these events and you've got yourself the Earth's largest mass extinction. But not all creatures died off. Some of the lucky ones managed to survive. The Dicynodonts later evolved into rodent-like creatures. They lived side by side with the dinosaurs. Sure, they weren't the top of the food chain, but it beats going extinct. They even outlasted the dinosaurs, evolving into present-day mammals. Small sharks migrated to the depths of the ocean, avoiding the acidic coastal waters, and they're still around today. The sauropsid reptiles also survived. Small lizards had a better chance of surviving compared to the big synapsids. Being cold-blooded and sluggish were excellent survival traits. In the coming Triassic and Jurassic periods, they evolved into mighty dinosaurs. It was once assumed that most trees went extinct during the Great Dying too, but scientists continue to find plant species that survived that time. Life, whether it's microorganisms, plants, or animals, is resilient and it always finds a way.
You know, as you get older, you start to reminisce more about the good old days. You know, when movies cost a nickel and gentlemen wore hats and Kids had manners, and all you needed to have fun on a Saturday morning was a hoop and a stick that you could roll down Main Street. Well, I'm not that old, unless you're talking to some of the kids working here at the What If offices. I tell them stories about watching videos on MTV and hanging out at the mall and renting movies at Blockbuster and playing outside with lawn darts. And they look at me like I'm 2 billion years old. Well, let me tell you, young whippersnappers, you want to know what life was like 2 billion years ago? I'll show you.
Let's step back 2 billion years back into Earth's evolution. A time full of life, but also mass extinction. An invisible killer was on the loose, ready to change the course of history. This was a time on Earth that had direct impact on what the world's like today. The animals that inhabit it, the food that we eat, and the air we breathe. Would you be able to survive in this new environment? And how did almost all life come to an end during this time? Time to go back 2 billion years ago. Welcome to Earth 2 billion years ago. You're landing at a time when Earth is about halfway to its current age. Now, as you make your descent towards this prehistoric Earth, you'll see blobs of land and maybe some chunks of ice separated by water. These land masses look nothing like our continents today, but that's gonna change soon. As your time machine touches down, it's a bleak and rocky landscape. There are no plants, no trees, no vegetation at all. No signs of any animals either. This was a time before complex multicellular life. The only living things on Earth were microorganisms. Yeah, it might sound a little dull, but at least there are no predators you need to worry about. I hope. Before you step out on the ground, you better put on your suit that's fitted with oxygen tanks, because while there is oxygen in the air, there isn't enough for you to breathe comfortably. It's less than 10% of today's oxygen levels. When Earth was first formed, there was only carbon dioxide, methane, and water vapor in the air. But more on that in a minute. As you step out, you look into the water surrounding you. It's completely still, and there are no fish swimming in it, but it's filled with a ton of green, slimy stuff. What you're looking at is a whole lot of cyanobacteria, one of the most important bacteria ever to live on Earth. Cyanobacteria are responsible for the air we breathe, but they were also responsible for the most massive extinction event of all time. Flashback about 500 million years. To see how this extinction event happened, we need to skip back in time even further, another 500 million years. This time when you land, you'll definitely need your oxygen mask because there's zero oxygen in the air. Like the calm before the mass extinction event, everything looks great on Earth. Our young sun is a bit dimmer, even a little bit cooler, but temperatures on Earth are balmy, around 21 degrees Celsius. There's plenty of liquid water, but no ice. The carbon dioxide and methane in the atmosphere are driving a greenhouse effect. The only life that's around is in the water, and again, I'm not talking about fish. It's all single-celled organisms like bacteria, which were living in very different circumstances, like the zero oxygen environment you're standing in right now. But this water isn't only filled with boring bacteria, it's now filled with cyanobacteria. This bacteria evolved with a special trait, the ability to use water as a fuel to photosynthesize. And with this trait, it was able to produce oxygen. The cyanobacteria began to change the chemistry of Earth's atmosphere. As bigger and bigger colonies of cyanobacteria photosynthesized, they produced more and more oxygen. Now, this didn't result in much at the start, as much of the oxygen being produced would react with minerals and get removed from the environment. But fast forward a few 100 million years, and things start to change drastically. Now, so much oxygen is being produced that it can't be removed fast enough. It oxygenates the water, it escapes into the air, it reacts with methane and displaces it from the atmosphere. Earth's atmosphere is filling up with oxygen and becoming breathable.
But don't take off that mask just yet. The oxygen level is still only 20 to 40% of what it is today. Maybe even lower, but this level is obviously much higher than the near zero level Earth had before. So, how do the other bacteria react to this new level of oxygen? Well, you can't see it happening because they're microscopic, but they're dying off in huge numbers. This is the Great Oxidation Event, also known as the biggest extinction event in Earth's history. The oxygen being created turned out to be pure poison for other bacteria, killing off 99% of all life on Earth. And this isn't the only catastrophic event happening. This massive amount of oxygen in the atmosphere is about to have a big impact on something else. The cyanobacteria is creating oxygen, but it's also wiping out two greenhouse gases, carbon dioxide and methane. These two gases played a key role in the evolution of Earth up until now. They help trap the sun's energy, keeping the planet warm. With both of these elements being removed and oxygen taking their place, it's starting to get very, very cold. Over hundreds of millions of years, you'd see massive changes in the landscape. The oceans are freezing. Sheets of ice are covering Earth. Brown and rocky land is now turning snow white. One of the earliest ice ages has begun. This is the start of the Huronian glaciation. It'll last about 200 million years. Throughout this time, you'll see Earth go through 3 glaciations. No part of the planet is spared. The continents, the poles, even at sea level, it's all ice all the time. Now, all life on Earth has already taken a severe beating, and these chilly conditions aren't doing much to help. Neither the oxygen nor the deep freeze are doing any good for the survival of our older microbes. But somehow, a small sliver of life, just around 1% of the living, persists over these 200 million years. No, sorry you can't see them, they're still microscopic and living in rare parts of the Earth. They're just hanging on, waiting for the ice to thaw. Back to 2 billion years ago. Wow, look at you, time traveling everywhere. You're quite the explorer. You know, if you want to explore even more, well, you should check out the What If Explorers Club on Patreon. There you'll find ad-free videos, get a chance to contribute story ideas like this one, and more. But our Explorers Club is in the present day, and right now, you're 2 billion years in the past, at a pretty significant turning point in history. A whole slew of exciting things are about to happen that will transform the face of Earth, both physically and biologically. Volcanoes are erupting, the ice is melting, a new continent is forming, and life is making a comeback. 3 different natural and geological processes started, beginning a transformation and ending the ice-covered Earth. Let's go through them. The sun is a little bit warmer now than when we flashed back the extra 500 million years, but maybe you noticed the sun is also looking a little bit brighter. Well, this is because the sun's luminosity increases at the rate of about 1 degree Celsius every 100 million years. So now the sun is 5 degrees warmer, but this warmer sun by itself is not what melted the ice sheets. A second natural phenomenon is now playing a role. It's typically known for causing mass destruction and extinctions, but at this point in history, it's shaping the continents and saving the Earth. I'm talking about volcanoes. Although Earth was just covered with significant amounts of ice, under the crust, it remains hot and molten. Plate tectonics are starting to change things deep below the surface. A giant surge of volcanic activity is happening. Powerful whirlpool currents of lava deep in the mantle can no longer be suppressed. Magma is swelling up under the Earth and breaking through in a series of volcanic eruptions. These explosive conditions will continue for another 300 million years. The small separate land masses that you saw as your time machine descended are being pulled together by this volcanic activity to form the first supercontinent, Nuna. Fast forward to today and you'd be standing in Colombia. The volcanoes are also causing a remarkable transformation of Earth's atmosphere. This will affect the climate, making it much warmer. Now,
This change might seem catastrophic at first, but it's going to give life on Earth another chance. That's because these volcanic eruptions are spewing water vapor and carbon dioxide into the air, and there's no microbial life to remove the carbon dioxide yet, so more and more of it is accumulating, trapping heat and making Earth hotter. With this new heat, the ice sheets are melting away. This volcanic action is still affecting us today. The lava spewing from the volcanoes eventually helped turn carbon into diamonds. In fact, most natural diamonds today can be traced back to this era. So take a moment to think about this cataclysmic event 2 billion years ago on your wedding day. But this isn't all that's happening. Over in Africa, another massive event is occurring. Nature's first nuclear reactor. Now, you're probably wondering how you could possibly get a nuclear reactor going on Earth. After all, don't you need a concentration of radioactive material? Well, yes you do. And this is what that pocket of Earth had. During its formation, Earth had accumulated bits of uranium from interstellar dust. This uranium was created by supernovas as stars died and exploded. Over hundreds of millions of years, microbial activity concentrated this uranium, and tectonic activity had it buried deep inside of Earth. 2 billion years ago, the right set of circumstances came together. A nuclear fission reaction began in the concentrated uranium. Uranium is naturally radioactive, so it decays over time. It splits to release neutrons. Like one domino hitting another, these neutrons in turn hit other uranium atoms which split, and this causes a chain reaction, creating this natural nuclear reactor. This natural process might have important lessons for humans today. Burning fossil fuels is making climate change worse, and the pressure is on to explore other sources of energy, like nuclear fission. But one of the challenges has always been how to store nuclear waste safely. It's possible that by studying this uranium mine, we could learn something useful. All these processes are working to warm up the Earth. The warming sun, greenhouse gases from volcanoes, and in this particular spot, Earth's very own nuclear reactor. As temperatures rise, water is becoming more prevalent than ice, and the landmass of Nuna is shrinking. One more important thing is happening right now. You can't see a lot of it without a microscope, but the 1% of microorganisms that made it through the Ice Age are wiggling their toes, metaphorically speaking, and starting to thrive. New life evolved through the oxygen-rich Ice Age. Microorganisms evolved that took in oxygen to burn food and released carbon dioxide in the process. The carbon dioxide released was then used by the cyanobacteria to produce more oxygen. This was happening at a microscopic level. Today, it happens with all kinds of different creatures. Now, humans and animals breathe in oxygen and exhale carbon dioxide. Plants take in carbon dioxide, photosynthesize, and release oxygen. So, the cyanobacteria was one of the original building blocks for all life today. But the oxygen didn't just power up microbes. During the long Ice Age, it began to form a protective layer in the upper atmosphere of the Earth, the ozone layer. This protected new life from ultraviolet radiation. Practically speaking, it expanded the real estate of Earth. Microbial life could now live on thin films of water protected from radiation and use the sun's energy to photosynthesize. You know what? I just remembered I packed a special microscope in the time machine. I know, sorry, we could have used it earlier. But you can use it to take a better look now at how cellular life is evolving. At this point in history, cells are changing to become more complex, with a distinct nucleus. This will allow the first plants to borrow traits from the cyanobacteria, which allows them to photosynthesize. So we can thank these microorganisms for the creation of all plant life we have today. Without photosynthesis, plants just wouldn't exist. Other creatures began to form during this time too. Scientists have unearthed fossils of multicellular creatures. These are sea creatures with soft, gelatinous bodies. They come in many different sizes,
some as long as 17 centimeters long. At the time, they probably burrowed into the mud of rivers. These particular creatures survived while oxygen concentrations were high, but later disappeared, leaving no direct descendants. Rest in peace, little guys. Their complex multicellular life is the basic blueprint for all multicellular life today. Plants, humans, animals, fungi. Even the algae from this time didn't disappear completely. They're preserved in beautiful rocks called stromatolites, and if you're ever in the mood to see 2 billion-year-old rocks, pay a visit to the Belcher Islands in Hudson Bay, Canada. Geological and biological events from 2 billion years ago are the key to life on Earth today. The oxygen we breathe, chlorophyll in the plants we eat, the beginnings of our complex multicellular existence, not to mention the protective ozone layer. Who knows, maybe the past holds the key to our future. Maybe cyanobacteria could gobble up carbon dioxide and save us from the climate crisis we're in today.
Asteroids, volcanoes, a lack of oxygen. These were just some of the ways that life was almost snuffed out on our planet. But against all odds, humans have managed to survive. So, how did we go from tiny molecules to taking over the entire world? Well, we'll take you on a journey through time that explores the evolution of humans in 20 minutes. Who the heck is Luca? Is it evolution's fault that we're all wearing braces? And wait a minute, do we all really have the same great-great-great-grandmother? 4.5 billion years ago. 4.5 billion years ago, something absolutely mind-blowing happened. And I'm not talking about the Big Bang. Believe it or not, this second act might be even wilder. I'm talking about abiogenesis, the beginning of life from non-life. Imagine a soup of ammonia, methane, and hydrogen in a hot broth of water. This could be cooking in a volcanic vent deep in the ocean. Instead of curry powder, Mother Earth probably added some sulfur, nickel, and iron to the broth. Molten rock underneath then heated things up. Over millions of years, these molecules clashed together to form chains of amino acids like lysine, lactic acid, and urea. These may have been the building blocks of life. In the end, some of these chains started replicating, and voila! Molecules became replicating cells. We now have life on Earth. Okay, it's probably not that simple, but this was roughly how the very first single-celled organism came to be. Probably in a deep-sea hydrothermal vent. Meet Luca, the last universal common ancestor. Humans, animals, fungi, not-so-fun guys, trees, we can all trace our existence back to this critter. One of the countless differences between modern humans and our friend Luca here is that he was not self-conscious. And while we may have tons of information on how we developed our big brains and started walking on 2 feet, our leap to self-consciousness is still a little mysterious. Let's take a moment to explore this a bit further because there's some pretty wild ideas out there. Some philosophers have even proposed that the key that unlocked our self-consciousness was psychedelic mushrooms. Yeah, the theory goes that our ability to use language, reflect on ourselves, and perform other unique human brain functions might all stem from ancient ancestors who consumed psilocybin mushrooms. These psychedelics are known to de-pattern the brain, alter modes of perception, and encourage social bonding, which could be the perfect ingredients for the emergence of human consciousness. And if you're doubting the power of these little mushrooms, all you need to do is look how they're being used today. One biopharmaceutical company called Cybin is using them to solve one of humanity's biggest problems: depression. Depression is a chronic illness that affects 280 million people worldwide, and it costs the global economy $1 trillion each year in lost productivity. Cybin is developing safe and effective psychedelic-based therapies with top partners, creating scalable synthetic psilocybin for inpatient depression treatment. Instead of the bandaged solution of antidepressants, which just numb the symptoms through daily use,
Cybin offers a long-term fix in just a couple of doses. Now, this might sound like something from the future, but the company's already gaining traction. They got the FDA's Breakthrough Therapy designation, which means a fast track for their drug development process. This is the first known time the FDA has granted this status for a psychedelic-based therapy for major depressive disorders. Cybin recently had no issue raising $150 million in capital, and following a positive FDA meeting, they're set to launch phase 3 trials in the US and Europe, with all clinical supplies ready to go. It's pretty wild to think that the same mushrooms that are healing our minds today may have played a key role in shaping them in the first place. But we're getting a little ahead of ourselves. In order to be self-conscious, we need a brain first. So let's get back to our timeline. 3.5 billion years ago. Before we humans can enter the scene, we need one very important thing, and that's oxygen. Earth used to be full of nitrogen, hydrogen, water vapor, and carbon dioxide. It wasn't until cyanobacteria came along that we got the precious oxygen that we humans need. 1 billion years ago. Fast forward to 1 billion years ago, when Earth was shifting around, creating different supercontinents. You had Rhodina, and then a couple of 100 million years later, another supercontinent, Pannotia, formed near the South Pole. This was also a time when single-celled organisms were starting to form into the first simple animals. 550 million years ago. 550 million years ago, one of the most critical events in our history took place, the Cambrian explosion. This is when hundreds of different animals burst onto the evolutionary scene. It was the building block for every major animal we know today, including you. 66 million years ago. The dinosaurs ruled Earth for hundreds of millions of years and survived multiple extinctions, but all good things eventually come to an end. 66 million years ago, an enormous asteroid hit Earth, landing on the Yucatan Peninsula in today's Mexico. It coughed up a ton of debris, blocking the sun. This finally wiped out the dinosaurs. This might seem like an insignificant event for us humans, but this extinction opened up the spot for mammals to become the leaders of the animal kingdom. 40 million years ago. These mammals included small, furry ancestors of all primates. The early primates were similar to the small rodents we see today. They lived and multiplied in a unique ecological niche, eating an omnivorous diet of fruits and insects. They continued to evolve, and their brains grew bigger. Without competition from the dinosaurs, they were able to grow exponentially. After millions of years of evolution, monkeys were seen in Africa, Asia, and South America. Fast forward another several million years, and apes evolved. Then the orangutan lineage split off. Soon it would be our turn. 8 million years ago. Then, about 8 or 9 million years ago, human, a common ancestor to both chimpanzees and humans, split into two lines, chimpanzee and human. For a long time, biologists thought this was a clean split that created separate chimpanzee and human species, but they were wrong. The two lines continued to mate and exchange genes for millions of years. It may have taken a full 4 million years before the two species fully broke from each other. Even today, though we're a different species, humans share an astonishing 98 to 99% of our genes with chimps. So, 5 to 6 million years ago, the Homo genus became distinct. Despite being a separate line, our ancestors were still pretty ape-like. You may have heard of Lucy, a 3.2 million year old ancestor from Ethiopia. Her brain was tiny, chimp-sized. The secret to big brains had yet to be discovered. And Lucy had long arms. She probably spent a lot of time swinging in the trees at night. But there was one important feature that separated early humans, including Lucy, from apes. We were bipeds, walking on two legs. What led to that? Well, there are two explanations for what got humans walking upright. The first is the savanna hypothesis. According to this, when forests retreated and savanna spread, humans spent more time foraging among the grasses, and walking upright allowed them to see better, like an SUV that towers over all the sedans. However, after studying chimps in western Tanzania, some scientists believe early humans mostly walked upright in trees. This may have been to gather fruit in the upper branches or to escape predators, but this theory has got some explaining to do. For instance, it can't explain why humans became bipeds but chimps didn't. Then how about them kangaroos? 2.6 million years ago. About 2.6 million years ago, early humans started getting the hang of things. Their brains began developing further, which allowed them to start making tools. The species behind this was Homo habilis, sometimes known as handyman. The early tools were only sharpened stones. It took another million years for humans to make hand axes, but we'll get to that in a bit. Scientists don't believe these early humans were fearless hunters. They were probably mostly scavengers, eating leftovers from kills of saber-toothed tigers. They used their tools to cut up carcasses and break bones to get to the nutritious marrow. If they got lucky, they also ate zebras, elephants, rhinos, buffalo, and giraffes. But mostly, they were just eating salad. It's no surprise that early humans weren't all that fearless. Life was dangerous. We see some pretty gruesome deaths in the fossil record from 1 to 2 million years ago. One adolescent was caught by a leopard and dragged up a tree. A 3-year-old was likely picked up by an eagle with its talons digging into the child's skull. And if it wasn't a leopard or an eagle, gum disease might get you. One kid got an infection after a baby tooth fell out and died of sepsis. Scientists even found a woman who died of vitamin A poisoning. Maybe she binged on animal liver. I don't know about you, but I'm feeling pretty lucky that I live in the present. 800,000 years ago. Then, 800,000 years ago, early humans learned a new valuable skill. Not only would this change the path of history, but it would give today's dentists something to do. But more on that in a second. Humans learned to control the use of fire. This meant we could keep ourselves warm, scare off predators, and cook meat. With humans eating more meat, this caused our most important organ to grow larger: the brain. But there was a downside to all this new delicious cooked food. It was now softer and easier to eat. This led to humans needing to chew less and our jaws becoming smaller. And a smaller jaw means we were more likely to have crooked teeth due to crowding. Take a look at this caveman's teeth. Yeah, perfectly straight because of the larger jaw size. 400,000 years ago. Okay, now that humans had fire and food, they were looking for a better form of shelter. They didn't want to live in dark and dingy caves any longer. They decided to start building houses. Now, the oldest building we have a record of is from 400,000 years ago, located in France. This is also when Homo heidelbergensis enters the picture. They're a key extinct species of human that were ancestors to Homo sapiens, Denisovans, and Neanderthals. Between 300,000 and 400,000 years ago, a group of Homo heidelbergensis moved from Africa to Eurasia. One subgroup moved west to Europe, becoming Neanderthals. Another subgroup moved east into Asia to become Denisovans. A little later, we'll tell you about interspecies romance, so keep these players in mind. Meanwhile, back in Africa, 300,000 years ago, a gradual evolutionary transition began from Homo heidelbergensis to the first of our species, Homo sapiens. In another 150,000 years, these archaic Homo sapiens further transitioned and evolved into the humans we know today. Fossil evidence helps us to see a transition in the physical features. The size and shape of the forehead, the brow ridge, and the face changed over time. Homo heidelbergensis had a more prominent brow ridge and a projecting face. Modern Homo sapiens skull was more rounded and bigger, and they also developed a higher forehead. 200,000 years ago. About 200,000 years ago, sometime in the middle of this transition from archaic to modern, a key female ancestor was born. Scientists now call her mitochondrial Eve. The DNA of each and every one of us tracks back to her. Think of her as your great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-great-grandmother. Okay, we've got fire, shelter, and a great-grandma, but life was still hard for early humans. Anything could kill you. Diseases, a fight over a giraffe carcass, encounters with animals. In Africa, it was lions or venomous snakes. In the Asian tropics, tigers. In the Americas, cougars and jaguars. So the average life expectancy was only about 30 years. The total number of humans on Earth was probably under 1 million. 74,000 years ago. Then, 74,000 years ago, our fragile existence was threatened. A supervolcano erupted. There was a massive global climate disruption. Africa experienced increasingly dry conditions. Homo sapiens came close to being wiped out. Maybe only 600 to 10,000 adults of reproductive age survived. During this difficult time, humans seem to have broken off into smaller, isolated groups. As the area became drier, rivers shrank, but this made aquatic life easier to catch, so for a while, humans ate more fish. Ultimately, the fish may have been depleted, and this was one of the likely reasons that they left Africa. 60,000 years ago. About 60,000 years ago, modern humans began migrating out of Africa. With waters receding, new travel routes might have become more accessible. Humans first went to Asia. By 45,000 years ago, they were settled in Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, and Australia. Now, remember I said we'd tell you about romance with Denisovans? Well, in Asia, Homo sapiens mated with Denisovan populations. Denisovan DNA is 3 to 6% of the genome of specific Asian populations today. 40,000 years ago. Now, around 40,000 years ago, Homo sapiens made it to Europe using two paths. They got into Eastern Europe from Turkey, and the Mediterranean coast was another route. Here, Homo sapiens mated with Neanderthals in Europe and acquired genes related to skin and hair growth from them. Those cute freckles that you see? That's from the Neanderthals. Now, around 15,000 years ago, Homo sapiens went from Asia to North America. But how? Well, remember, the topography was different. Though today's continents were in place, a piece of land formed a bridge between Asia and North America for 5,000 years. It was called Beringia, and it connected eastern Siberia to Alaska. After making the trek to North America, some traveled down to South America. Now, this was the point in time when all other Homo species became extinct, leaving Homo sapiens as the only remaining humans left. We don't know exactly why this happened, but research suggests that it may have been due to us having better survival rates, or the other species were just outcompeted in some way. 12,000 years ago. Then, 12,000 years ago, we reached a major turning point. Humans began to master farming. They grew wild varieties of peas, lentils, and barley, and began herding goats and oxen. The first farmers lived in the Fertile Crescent, a region in the Middle East, but there wasn't just one group. Multiple unrelated groups, isolated from each other, all pursued farming around this time. As humans became farmers, population growth picked up. By 1 AD, our population was about 170 million. In the 14th century, we were hit by the bubonic plague. It wiped out 50 million people of a worldwide population of just about 450 million. It took 2 whole centuries for Europe's population to recover to pre-plague levels. 250 years ago. 250 years ago, the Industrial Revolution began. Our world transformed from rural and agricultural to urban and industrialized. Our population started to grow rapidly. We hit 1 billion people in 1804, and in 2023, we were at 8 billion. Our growth has been exponential, but humans have needed vast amounts of energy. First, we got this from coal, then from oil and natural gas. Now, we're on the path to harvesting solar power, discovering new technology, and space travel. Who knows what the future holds for humanity? We often think of dinosaurs as some of the most terrifying creatures that have ever existed. But what if I told you that there were some ancient creatures that were even more terrifying than dinosaurs? Ones with dagger-like teeth, massive horns, and gigantic sizes that would put T-Rex to shame. There were even some insects that were as big as you. Let's travel through time as we take a look at creatures scarier and more dangerous than dinosaurs. Megalodons. Ready to come face to face with one of the scariest aquatic predators of all time? Meet the Megalodon. The name of this prehistoric shark literally means big tooth. So you can count on the fact that these were some of the most terrifying animals ever to exist, especially during their time on Earth, between 3.6 to 23 million years ago. Megalodons were the largest sharks and one of the biggest fish ever, measuring a staggering 18 meters long and weighing over 70 tons. These sea creatures were mythologically gigantic and dangerous. They had massive jaws that could swallow you and a friend whole at the same time, even without clamping down on you with one of their many massive teeth that were bigger than dinner plates and perfectly designed to tear through your flesh with ease. Megalodons ate whales, dolphins, and possibly other sharks. And if we put them up against the scariest dinosaurs of all time, they'd certainly be a contender for the most apex of all apex predators. Woolly mammoths. Okay, let's move on to a beast that our earliest human ancestors used to encounter thundering through frozen landscapes. Woolly mammoths. These colossal creatures were a testament to nature's ability to adapt to and thrive in even the harshest of living conditions. They roamed the Earth during the Ice Age from about 400,000 to 4,000 years ago. And then they went extinct. If they hadn't, who knows if humans would have gone on to become the dominant species we are today. Woolly mammoths weighed between 6 and 8 tons and stood at the imposing height of nearly 4 meters. It just so happens that they had gigantic curved tusks that were also nearly 4 meters long. But while their absolutely intimidating size might make them as fiercely scary as the dinosaurs, these fuzzy giants were herbivores. Lucky for us, that means they wouldn't need to hunt us down for dinner. Saber-toothed tigers. This brings us to one of the most formidable predators of the Pleistocene epoch, maybe even of all time, the saber-toothed tiger. These prehistoric cats stalked the land like silent assassins between 10,000 and 2.5 million years ago. They hunted everything from mammoths to mastodons. And yes, it's possible that an ancient relative of yours might have had a close encounter with one of the beasts. Saber-tooths weren't your average house cat either. They could be as long as 2 meters from head to toe and weigh up to 300 kilograms. Plus, as the name suggests, they had 2 massive and sharp canine teeth that resembled long, curved swords. These made them truly fearsome predators. They would ambush their prey and take them out with bite after fatal bite. Not that I'd want to be anywhere near this battleground, but these are definitely animals that could take on even the most dangerous dinos, like velociraptors. Early primates. Okay, this one might not send the same shiver down your spine, but if you look further back into our own gene pool, there are some intimidating specimens. Like this ancestor of ours. Look no further than the early primate known as Dinopithecus. These baboon-like primates lived between 500,000 to 2.5 million years ago. And even though they aren't huge by today's standards, At around 50 kilograms, they were one of the largest primates of the time. And considering that they would have had to compete with the previous mentioned beasts and even early humans, there's no doubt that these monkeys knew how to fend off other large predators. Elasmotherium. This next ancient animal might have the most beautiful and least scary sounding name of them all. It was known as the Siberian unicorn. But don't be fooled, they were not rare magical horses. Actually, they were an ancestor to the rhinoceros. And you better believe that they were big and had one very large horn protruding from their head. They were believed to have weighed around 4.5 tons, but that didn't make them slow by any stretch. They had long legs that allowed them to run across open grasslands at stunning speeds. And while there isn't any evidence of one in our fossil records, it's possible that their mythologized unicorn horns measured up to 2 meters in length. Glyptodon. From here on out, some of the animals from the past could seem a little weird. And in terms of a scary weirdo that might be able to give a dinosaur a run for its money, check out the armored mammal known as the Glyptodon. These were basically prehistoric armadillos, which, to be honest, makes them sound kinda cute. Except they weren't that. Covered in a bony, armored shell, Glyptodons were up to 3 meters in length and weighed over a ton. Their shell was an excellent protective shield from predators, but that's not all they had going for them. Their tails were equipped with a spiky club-like end that was a powerful weapon against anyone who dared step in their way. If an ankylosaurus tried to mess with this beast, well, yeah, good luck. Glypto would club him right in the ankles. Giant cockroaches. In today's world, cockroaches are seen as pests, but also as a symbol of how life can survive even in the grossest, least hospitable conditions. Well, their prehistoric ancestors took resilience to an entirely new level. Approximately 359 to 299 million years ago, these critters were some of Earth's earliest inhabitants. And okay, compared to some of the other creatures on this list, they weren't huge, but at lengths of up to 9 centimeters, they were large for their time and bigger than any roach you'd want to find in your kitchen. And while they may not stand much of a chance against dinosaur predators, they had armored exoskeletons that would have done a pretty good job protecting them. Yeah, good luck calling an exterminator on these bad boys. Pulmonoscorpius. Imagine a scorpion. Okay, you're already running away screaming, but brace yourself for something even worse. A scorpion with a tail that's bigger than you. Yeah, that's the nightmare reality of the Pulmonoscorpius. Using this gigantic tail, they could deliver a deadly venomous sting. Not to mention they could attack and grab enemies with their imposing pincers. With most dinosaurs, you need to worry about confronting a towering beast with massive teeth, but with this giant scorpion, you need to worry about all that and the potential that they could poison you. Yikes! Any creature that coexisted with them about 300 million years ago would have been best to steer clear of these killer scorpions. Millions of years ago, humans were near the bottom of the food chain. Predators, weather, and diseases all posed the threat of wiping the species out. But then, thanks to evolution, humans went from huddling in dark caves to building full-blown cities. How did that happen? This mysterious era was a time when history wasn't officially recorded, but it brought on a ton of innovation that would be the building blocks of our world today. Let's hop in our time machine and take a trip back to the prehistoric era. Okay, first, what is this strange prehistoric era that you've ended up in? Well, this was a time in history when humans began to develop the world we have today. It was comprised of 3 main ages: the Stone Age, the Bronze Age, and the Iron Age. The names of these ages reflected the primary materials that humans were using to make their tools. But these materials also provided so much more than simple instruments. They inspired an entirely new society and helped humans evolve into the New World. Let's check it out. The Stone Age. The Stone Age comprised three main eras: the Paleolithic, Mesolithic, and Neolithic periods. The Stone Age began over 3 million years ago, and this was one of the most critical ages for humans and our evolution. One of the most significant advancements of this time was the creation of stone tools. Early humans began making and using tools from rocks and other raw materials around them. One of their tools was sharp pebbles that were used to cut and sharpen other materials. They were essentially just sharpened rocks that humans would hold to make more complex and useful tools. After humans mastered this, they moved on to sharpening other stones, stones used for chopping. These could be used to cut wood or help prepare food. Next, their most complex tool, the hand axe. These were made using multiple techniques. First, you needed to form the rock using a hard hammer technique. Once that's done, you'd refine the thin edge using a soft hammer technique. Today, these tools seem incredibly simple, and you could make them yourself just by looking at them. But millions of years ago, these tools required a detailed understanding of how stone works and how it behaves under certain circumstances. Yeah, this again sounds really simple, but by figuring this out in the Stone Age, humans proved they'd made a significant leap in brain function and problem solving. Another major innovation during this time was harnessing fire. Fire provided shelter, warmth, and protection for humans, allowing them to begin their journey to the top of the food chain. After millions of years of humans playing around with their newly discovered tools, they were able to become much more than just a hunting and gathering society. This is where farming came into play. Humans in the Mesolithic period began experimenting with planting food. As the climate changed, it became easier to grow their own plants in the soil, and more types of food became available. Farming also brought the domestication of animals. Goats, pigs, and cattle all had benefits for humans. They could be used for food, clothing, even labor. Now, once farming and domestication started to take off, well, it brought a shift in settlement patterns. Instead of nomadic humans moving from cave to cave, they were able to start building more permanent homes. Humans in the final period of the Stone Age, the Neolithic period, built on top of these inventions. Instead of just experimenting with seeds, humans began to learn agricultural techniques and were able to plant enough crops to feed their settlements. This period brought new tools and technology and a completely different social structure. With more food and permanent settlements, the population boomed. This led to a division of labor, political structures, and more. The Bronze Age. From 3300 to 1200 BCE was the Bronze Age. One of the key factors of this age was humans discovering how to use metals like copper, tin, and of course bronze in their tools. With these materials, they made more advanced instruments and weapons, ones that would last longer and could be more intricate since metal is more malleable than stone. This also opened the door for artisans and experts to begin working with bronze. They created art that was sought after and influenced culture. Weapons and armor made of bronze impacted how war was conducted at the time. But bronze materials weren't the only new kids on the block. The wheel was invented. This made it easier to move people and supplies. Trade routes between settlements were created. Different settlements could share or sell resources amongst each other, allowing civilization to progress even faster. This led the way for urbanization and the introduction of cities. Settlements in places like Egypt and Greece eventually grew to a point where the population was so big it required some sort of urban planning. This created cities. Society evolved further. Trade, administration, and writing were all starting to come into play. But all of this would have been impossible without food. During the Bronze Age, humanity started to develop mass farming techniques. This was possible because of better tools and an enhanced knowledge of how crops worked. Humans began to understand what crops grew best, where, and during what seasons. The Iron Age. Around 1200 BCE, parts of Europe and the Middle East began making tools with iron. Now, this might sound like a small innovation, but this metal allowed society to make massive technological steps. Iron is much stronger and more durable than copper. This allowed humans to build better tools and weapons. Like, good luck if you were at war with your bronze armor and weapons and had to face an army with all iron gear. The societies with iron tools were the ones in power. Iron was also much easier to mine and more readily available than copper. This allowed humans to make more tools that were economically viable. And more tools means more food that can be harvested, more buildings that can be made, the opportunity for society to progress and flourish. Now, the process of making these tools also required significant innovation. Smelting iron and being able to forge and temper the material required huge technological jumps. But cities weren't limited to making just a few tools at a time. They were becoming production powerhouses. They could produce dozens or hundreds of tools whenever they needed. Ironworking was so popular that over the next couple hundred years, it expanded across the globe. From Scotland to Africa, societies began using iron and learning the methods of building tools. This allowed more cities and settlements to progress and prosper. Expanded trade routes helped with the progress. More cities and cultures could communicate with each other than never before. The creation of iron tools facilitated the need for different cities to trade and share resources. Another essential tool invented during this time was the iron plow. This allowed us to farm crops more efficiently than ever before, often creating a surplus of food. And of course, more food allowed populations to grow bigger, all thanks to these newfound tools. Around 550 BCE, the Iron Age gave way to the Age of Classical Antiquity, marked by the beginning of humans recording and documenting our own history. And the rest is, well, history. Literally. Okay, well, that's it for our electrifying expedition examining the educational eras of prehistoric Earth. We're glad you could make the time to join us on this journey through time. Speaking of journeys through time, this show has been a bit of a journey. It's been a solid 4.5 hours of excitement, talking about the past. See, history can be interesting. Next time, instead of diving into the prehistoric past, maybe we'll blast off into the distant future, hit warp speed, and zoom past the stars on a celestial voyage. A Star Trek, if you will. But that's a story for another What If. Hey everyone, welcome to today's marathon of amazing, astonishing, and awe-inspiring episodes of What If. Today, we're taking you back in time, deep into the past, to a land before time, before history. Prehistoric, you might say. Yeah, we're taking you through every prehistoric era we can think of. Billions of years